All right, Adam, I was thinking a lot when we started covering the Yuan-Ti episode. I mean, we did Lizard Folk last week. This week we're doing Yuan-Ti and covering kind of that scaly kind. And we spent a little bit of time saying, hey, what is the inspiration for how your lizard folk look? Are they crocodilian? Are they like gecko kind shit? We had that small discussion. I have that same kind of thought when it comes to Yuan-Ti. Are they more king cobra, python, anaconda? Like when you're flavoring your snake people, what kind of snake do you first draw on? Shall we roll? In the box, Dan. Wow, we both rolled natural ones. Off to a stellar start.
Snake eyes, Dan. We rolled snake eyes on the Yuan-Ti.
I got a 15.
I got a 16. Penis, obviously. Penis covered. Like, that's the snake. Trouser snake. That's what we're...
The cut or uncut?
Well, if it's a king cobra style... I think we can just cut it right there. Yeah.
It's a Mimic, the Roundtable Dungeons & Dragons discussion podcast, where you never know what you're going to get.
Welcome to another episode in our conversation on mob mentalities, where we look at some of the slithering humanoids out there that make up the enemy armies in Dungeons & Dragons. I'm Dan, and with me today is Adam, and this episode is called Yuan-Ti Cults, Pyramid Schemers.
I'm super proud of that one. That one's one of my favorites so far.
You know what? You've had some gems. This one feels middling.
You do it from now on then, Dan.
I'd rather not. Anyways, we've reached out to our army. I mean, you're not wrong. We've reached out to our army of friends and allies to break down what a Yuan-Ti cult looks like in 5th edition. For now, though, let's jump into the basics. So, as we said in the cold open, Adam, the Yuan-Ti are the other side of that lizard scaly folk coin that we see as playable races.
I hard disagree. I don't think it's a coin. This is something radically different than the lizard folk. Like, if you're going to have the scaly races, then, I mean, are you including kobolds?
Yeah.
And dragonborn?
It's more of a cube than a coin, I guess.
Okay, that's a square. Cube has 6 sides. Anyway, beside the point. Anyway, listen.
So we're going to talk mainly about Yuan-Ti and the survey about them today. More about their history than anything else, and that's how we're going to start off. Yuan-Ti aren't just your normal scaly snake folk that raised up as snake folk from way past, right? They don't have that same kind of origin dwarves and elves and orcs have. No, Yuan-Ti were once humans in eras gone. If you were in the Forgotten Realms, if you're traveling around Toril or Faerun or whatever you want to call it, this is like pre-Netheril era, which is where a lot of the Forgotten Realms are forgotten, right? So Yuan-Ti were once humans who worshipped snake gods. They worshipped the serpent's poise and its flexibility, but also really focused in on its detachment from emotion, very specifically. And they believed themselves, because of this detachment, that they were the most enlightened of humanoids and of all mortals, really. They were incredibly decadent and wealthy and expansionistic. They had great...
Is that a word? Expansionistic?
I'm making it a word.
Expansive?
See, expansive just makes it seem like their borders were large. And it was,
or they were very, very prone to being fat.
Yeah, right?
No.
But no, I'm saying like they were never satisfied with where their borders sat. They always wanted more power, more kingdom, more rule over others.
They're like colonial.
But
colonizing.
Yeah, but far more violent.
So British. Traditionally British.
I mean, yeah, I would almost say Roman with it.
I don't know, man. Ask India.
Yikes. Anyways, this whole Roman feel, I think, fits with them as well, because it has they focused a lot on these grand temples and colosseums and these large structures. I don't think the British Empire really had a lot of, like...
No, they just had other people's.
I guess that's true. Anyways, they were also superior in technology to the other cultures around them. Now, when the general populace of intelligent humanoids in their era were still mastering fire and cudgels and shit, these guys were walking around with steel weapons, right?
Okay, I gotta pause you because this is the thing that pisses me off more than anything else. Yuan-Ti don't make sense in my brain.
No, they don't either.
Because this is completely by itself, when it's insular, great. Like, the lore is flavorful and fun and whatnot. Humans are the new race in the Forgotten Realms.
Yeah.
What the fuck were the elves and dwarves doing at this point? Well, the elves are learning fire. The Yuan-Ti are around. That doesn't make any sense to me. Right? So there's a real disconnect here with the other, like, fantasy races around.
I think you could justify it by saying that the world was the same size, but these groups were far more isolated because populations were lesser, right? So your elves were still around, but they were far more secluded and in their own little areas. And when you talked about Yuan-Ti, they do occasionally mention elves and how they ran into elves, but they never mentioned dwarves. But that's probably because dwarves, especially in their earlier days, were very isolationistic.
Okay, you are making up words all over the place. But I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I still don't think it makes a lick of fucking sense, but
yeah.
Here we are with it. I mean, I'm just going to compare it against other humans.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. Where their advances and their attitudes on expansion really come in is their idea of how their worship came through. And this is when you start feeling a lot of that now more modern Yuan-Ti feel. Their worship became fanatical, and their priests were the ones that ran their societies. As they expanded these, they would build these central temples higher and higher, eventually resulting to communicating with these ancient serpent gods that they had, who taught them the rituals to become more snake-like themselves.
So this is still humans at this point?
This is still humans at this point.
Yeah.
Now, these ancient snake gods that taught them these things started to inform them that cannibalism and humanoid sacrifices and straight up breeding with snakes were things that you could do.
Do not Google that.
Don't Google that, please. So the Yuan-Ti society started to sacrifice humans and
as you do, right?
Yeah. So they would kill people, then eat their flesh, and then perform sorcerous rituals in wriggling pits of live snakes, but naked, that let them mix their flesh with the snakes. And a lot of these rituals still exist to this day in Yuan-Ti societies and snake cults.
Asterisks, for those of you listening, if you're going to have naked sacrifices, clear it with your table in your session 0 first.
Yeah. So the one thing about this is that these rituals are incredibly cost prohibitive. And you see that with the different stages of what a Yuan-Ti can be. The more snake-like you get, the closer to your god you are, the higher in power you are. And that's kind of how the Yuan-Ti work. So like on one end you have your Yuan-Ti Purebloods, which is the playable race, but they are the ones who are more humanoid than snake. So they often function as spies and stuff, and they go to intermix with normal human society, but they're respected. They're above the slaves, but they're, in terms of Yuan-Ti society, they tend to be
Pureblood is not a good thing.
No, it's not.
That's a racial slur in Yuan-Ti society.
There are some slaves that can work themselves up to being equal to purebloods in Yuan-Ti society. But on the other side, you have the anathema and the abominations, right? And these are the guys who, they're more snake than people, right? So, I mean, you really see this. And to gain in steps, you have to get the materials and perform this ritual as a smaller step. It feels very devil-like in that respect as well.
No, that's too Christian for me. This feels like
how 5e works with devils. How, as you up in rank, you change your form. That is kind of what it's like in Yuan-Ti society. As you up in rank, you're changing your form. You go from like a pureblood to a Malison, and all the way up to an anathema or a abomination, right? And you have to do this ritual. Whereas in fiendish hell, like devil culture, you start off as a lemur. No. Yes.
Yeah.
And you work your way up from like barb devil to...
Yeah. But the difference is that another devil will grant you the power to raise you up in rank, and it's very difficult to do. This is rituals you're getting almost like warlock patron level.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and it is the same ritual. Like, it's not
This is not an evolution. This is a magical shit that's happening to you.
Yeah. And I mean, you see that eventually over the years, this focus on being a snake, this evolution into being a snake is eventually cost them their humanity in a sense. And they got too big, too powerful, too focused on this. And that is what caused the downfall of their society. So these rituals, although they still exist, caused a cultural ascension of sorts amongst the Yuan-ti. Those who didn't partake in the ascension were forced to become slaves or food, as cannibalism went absolutely rampant throughout their entire society. It was crushed to the minimal form it is now by the armies of outside civilizations finally having enough of their shit. And with all this infighting within the Yuan-ti group, these outside societies came in and crushed them down. And this is where you see a lot of presence of elves leading the previous humans. Like, there's kind of a Lord of the Rings feel to this.
Yeah, the other thing to keep in mind here, too, is that Yuan-ti do not have, like, a king.
No.
They are very much all living together because they're exiles from society, but there are different worships and different sects and cults within the Yuan-ti themselves. And I'm going to get into that in the next episode. Okay. So in a week, jump into the future and go listen to that. But one of the things to really keep in mind is that the leaders of the cults, the leaders at the temples and whatnot, are usually at war with leaders of other temples within the same city. Right?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It's very much faction versus faction in Yuan-ti society.
I mean, you could have a full campaign because a lot of these massive temples that they built in the ancient times when they were a more established and powerful society, these temples grew into full city-states in size, right? Like, these things were huge.
I'm going to say that with the exception of goblins, drow, and giants, this was probably one of the more complex and complicated like societal structures that we see in D&D.
Yeah, it's definitely the most fleshed out to it. Yeah. But so these massive city-states were kind of their base level of power, and they would let other societies have their stuff as long as it didn't conflict with the Yuan-ti snake god. And we've seen this with a couple other things. Hobgoblins kind of do the same thing, where you could keep your gods as long as you worship ours first.
Yeah.
Right? It's kind of the same thing. So they held their power in this way for centuries. Even having steel before it was common knowledge, like we mentioned before, and the most powerful mages. A lot of the spells we have today were pioneered by Yuan-ti and Netheril wizards, right? So that's kind of where we see a lot of these spells. That's why we have a lot of these transmutative spells come from Yuan-ti cultures. At least that's the way I like to put it. Now, they also held wealth as a high regard because snakes like shiny things, apparently. So they often fought...
That's fucking news to me.
Right?
Like, that's weird, but okay.
So they would often fight dragons for their stockpile of riches. But the thing that really threw me for a loop was Naga.
Yeah, Naga and Yuan-ti are like arch nemesis.
Yeah, and I've always like been, all right, so you have a... When I'm building homebrew encounters, I'm like, well, those are snake things and that's a snake thing, so they go well together.
You snake racist.
I mean, rude, but yeah. I mean, it surprised me that Naga were that different. Now, for those of you listening to the podcast who don't know what Naga are, they're
snakes with people faces.
Snakes with people faces.
But they're really magical. They're very different. They're monstrosities, and they're their own unique, crazy brand of batshit insanity. I do not like them as part of the Yuan-ti. I like that they're their own weird, separate thing, especially because some of them can be good. We'll do an episode on them in the future.
Yeah, we certainly will. Anyway, so when these opposing nations took back their lands from Yuan-ti grip in this massive war, this massive push against the Yuan-ti, they mostly shattered all their buildings to dust and forced the Yuan-ti to hide in these temples and city-states for so long that they no longer held the same level of threat they had before. Now, you really see this in the fact that a lot of these Yuan-ti strongholds in like the modern age D&D, you'll often have like a elven strongholds somewhere close by or human cities somewhere close by who are keeping a watch on the Yuan-ti. The Yuan-ti, like, yeah, they like to kind of hide through and be sneaky in their jungles, but people know they're there.
Yeah, the other thing that I really like about that is, okay, so you know why the Forgotten Realms is called the Forgotten Realms?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Because it's a bunch of crumbling societies that have come from previous eras and whatnot.
And you
they've
see
got
this with like the
temples
Netheril and the Yuan-ti, and it builds up through there. Yeah.
Yuan-ti is one of the perfect examples of when you end up going to get the magical crystal from beneath the jungles of the... It's probably a crumpled Yuan-ti temple, and it's going to be a bunch of snake shit.
Yeah.
And that is one of the standards for D&D. You don't get, ancient orc settlements, but you do with Yuan-ti.
Which I really like, and not just because I'm a big Indiana Jones fan. Because yes, snakes. It's got to be snakes. But also that otherworldly serpentine look to the temples is just iconic in D&D. It's classic in D&D.
Oh, yeah.
You expect to see, when you walk into an ancient temple, snake statues built out of the wall, or are absolutely beautifully put together relief of snakes eating things.
You've been to Disneyland?
Several times, yeah.
Yeah, okay, me too. The Indiana Jones ride is just exactly what I imagined.
Does it still exist? Because it's been a bit since I've been there.
I assume it still exists. I mean,
no.
Anyway,
if they've got It's a Wonderful Life or It's a Small World, yeah, that's the one.
It's a Wonderful Life. That's a fuck of a ride. I wouldn't like that. Okay, so everybody start off on the bridge. Jesus.
Oh God!
Wow, this got dark quickly, didn't it? All right, at the very end, everybody ring a bell. Yikes. Okay.
So the Yuan-ti stayed in their strongholds, what was left of their society, for thousands of years after losing their power, but they were not idle. Don't think that they were. They have always waited and planned and plotted to take over the surrounding societies. But the surrounding nations grew in power that made the Yuan-ti have to use strategy and precision rather than all-out warfare to attain their goals. They became experts in espionage because of this, and political infiltration to weaken the surrounding empires enough to be no challenge to a Yuan-ti assault. They also know that where they may never attain the same level of rulership directly over humans as they once did, the control and corruption of enemy rulers is just as good a fate, and the Yuan-ti will blackmail, manipulate, often using drugs and magic. Like, Yuan-ti will be the ones that okay, well, if I addict your son to the heroin, you'll do what I want you to do.
They're Grima Wormtongue.
Yeah, they are, slimy. But they'll do all that, including bribe, to achieve their goals, right? Now, let's talk about their culture now that we got a little bit of grasp of where their history came from. Emotions are now foreign in Yuan-ti culture. They have worked so hard to squash that side of their humanity, and they are now past it, to the point where if you show emotion, you're exploitable to a Yuan-ti.
Okay, all right, hold on. I've got an issue with this. I think that's generally mostly true, that you're not going to see them writing sonnets and love poems, or crying in the streets. But their emotions like jealousy and avarice and
they're not quite lizard folk.
No, they're not, and that's my thing. Lizard folk are lizard brained. They're freaking weird. And I mean, on the ultimate other side of things, the Kuo-toa, who are nothing but just roiling balls of emotion all of the time, usually fear, but fuck, I love Kuo-toa.
And reverence.
But with the Yuan-ti, they will still feel, but they will do it behind closed doors, and they will be very private about it. And it's only going to be the negative emotions. They will have a seething rage deep in their heart for their nemesis. Yeah. Where lizard folk will not.
Well, a Yuan-ti, I feel, is where their status is never good enough to them. They are ambitious to a fault. So I think you're right. If they've achieved one of their goals and are sitting in victory.
Oh, they've got pride and like this.
Right. Yeah, but they sit in victory. They're going, okay, here's next. Yeah. Right. They're instantly scheming to the next step up to progress.
So as much as they don't have emotions, I don't think they have what we consider to be humanity, the humane emotions. Yeah. They still feel emotions. It's just not the good ones.
But they're also incredibly pragmatic, and you see that with a lot of these emotionless races like the lizard folk. This pragmatism comes in, and to the point where Yuan-ti have a nearly unshakable will to themselves. Like once they set their eyes on a goal, they're gonna get that and achieve that goal unless they are otherwise influenced by magic, right? Like they are just laser lock focused on obtaining more and more power, which also includes their worship. Yuan-ti do not fanatically worship their gods with their pragmatism, but see their gifted powers as stepping stones to eventually replace and consume their gods.
Yeah.
Right? They have really no morality, like we mentioned. A Yuan-ti will do absolutely anything to gain in power or ascension, and they will also use this pragmatism to influence others, often starting by promising riches or power to those who are wanting in those fields. Right? Now, if you were to be one of those people and you wanted to trust Yuan-ti, this would be a fatal mistake, as Yuan-ti have no desire to lift anybody up in station but themselves. And any allegiance is a necessary part in that end goal to Yuan-ti. The second that allegiance lacks purpose, it is shunned, destroyed, and consumed. Which also means that honor doesn't exist in a Yuan-ti society. Ambush, poison, and numbers are used whenever possible to guarantee a fight. DMs, please be careful with this. Because...
yeah, you'll over-prep and murder your party.
Oh, yeah. And if you wanted to, well, it's a full city-state. It's got hundreds of Yuan-ti. You've just killed your level 18 party. They may be relatively low level, but...
the action economy is in your favor.
Action economy is going to be in your favor. Now...
that's one of the things that I run into a lot, which doesn't make any sense in lore versus mechanics, is they'll rely on numbers when they fight. We saw this with the lizard folk as well. And I'm like, yeah, but then they kill your people, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like... how much of D&D is supposed to be sneaking behind the army? Your players should be able to outthink the enemy because the enemy is going to have superior numbers at all time. And that's something that I feel like most players don't want to do. They want to be Thor and just walk in, right? And they want to smash shit up, right? That's Brad and Dave right there.
Fuck, if I have to DM one more character of Brad's that has lightning damage focus of some way, shape, or form...
yeah, because he wants everyone to look at me and my giant hammer that I'm wielding, right?
The hammer's his penis.
Do you think it's overcompensating?
I mean, how he plays his characters, it might be undercompensating.
Yikes.
Anyways, so as you see with this, we did mention that there are these steps to their culture, and they will scheme and plot to get increase in rank. There are legit physical forms to their rank, but don't think that all Malisons are the same and all Abominations are the same.
No, they're not.
No, there is a gradient of snakiness to it all. I'm just going to make words up left, right, and center in this episode.
Apparently.
Yeah.
Jesus, Dan.
So you will have purebloods that just have slitted eyes, but in all other ways are human, right? You'll also have abominations that have 6 arms, 4 arms, 3 arms. Like, they're all over the place. So let's real quick go over what their structure is like in their culture.
Yeah, let's hit in the broad strokes because we're going to get into it a little later in this episode.
Of course. So their top caste are the abominations. Your Malisons are going to be your middle caste, and your purebloods are your base. And anathema are rare and are above even abominations, while everything else below are broodguards or slaves.
So we have seen this a few times with the idea of the Flind and the Tanaruk and the warlord for the hobgoblins and stuff.
Yeah.
The idea of this supreme being that sometimes takes over the entire horde that you have. The anathema is like that as well, and we're going to cover them in detail next week.
Yeah.
But expect that most Yuan-ti societies do not have them, and strangely, do not want them.
No, a lot of the abominations will actively keep an anathema out if they could do it covertly.
Well, and they're trying to get it themselves.
Yes.
So they don't want anyone else to do it, but nobody wants an anathema because you are going to be pretty much subjugated to its will forever because those fuckers don't age.
No, they don't.
So that's another cool thing about them. Like I say, next week we'll get into that. So assume though, for our purposes today, abominations are going to be the top cast.
Yeah. Below them are Malisons, and Malisons are where you're going to find the most
body
horror and variation in the snakiness of the Yuan-ti.
Yeah, there are 5 different types, but even that can get really specific. And
yeah. Below that are your purebloods. They are your playable race. So purebloods are the most human of the Yuan-Ti. They are often the ones that are going to be out inside of external society, out from their little, clutches of sanctuary in these temples and city-states and ruins. That is the reason why a lot of your purebloods, that is the playable race we have for Yuan-Ti.
Yeah.
Right? Next below are Broodguard, which may have started as humans, but they are the ones who have been tortured and force-fed an elixir to become these weird horror snake body horror things that are completely and 100% zero will subservient to any Yuan-Ti.
Yeah.
Yeah. And below them are slaves, which, to be completely honest, are there mostly for food and sacrificial reasons.
Yeah, I mean, they'll do the manual labor and shit too, but it's only a matter of time, right?
Right. And I do want to make a point that all the slaves aren't just humans. Any intelligent humanoid or beast can have that role. Undead and conjured or created minions are also present in that.
The other interesting thing is that there are cults and cultists, and we'll talk about this in depth next week as well.
Yeah.
Some humans, specifically human slaves, who worship the gods during they get converted during their slavery, can become cultists and will be released.
Yeah.
But they torture you. If you are a human, they torture you either to eat you or to convert you.
Yeah. Now, if you are a slave who fails your job, your goal, whatever your task is, you are either murdered as a sacrifice or turned into a Broodguard, because it removes all your will, right?
Yeah.
Now, moving on to what we often see with Yuan-Ti society is there's this bent towards a hyper-sexualized culture in a way.
You do this every time there's a snake thing. This is the Christian Dan where...
No, there's legit lore based around it. That's why I'm bringing it up.
You did this with the Merilith as well, and there was nothing in 5th ed. When we were talking about Merilith, I don't know, 20 episodes ago, you're like, oh, they're hypersexual. I'm like, they're super not. They got a bikini top because it's a fantasy game, and of course they do, right? Hashtag patriarchy. Jesus. But anyway, no, but the idea is that they're not prolific. They're not big breeders, right?
Well, no. I mean, you can see that they aren't because their society has been kept in, a certain level for thousands of years,
but I don't
right?
even think
So
they've
they're not growing beyond that.
But they're not lustful.
They recognize that having a large brood brings more power, right? They do understand that. And because of that, you will see there is a lot of interbreeding amongst them. And even though that there is this large physical divergence between these steps in their society, between Malisons and Abominations and stuff, they can still interbreed with each other and often do. The females will lay the eggs in clutches in a large open hatchery, which means, there isn't much of a family unit, but they will create these large masses so that they could have people that are more subservient to them.
I also love the fact that there's no humility and shit to these guys either. So
None whatsoever.
Like the pregnant females will be like, I will not be available 3 weeks from now, for I am thick with young. And just like really grossly phrased, I am swollen with many children. The brood grows within.
Yeah.
Right? And just really gross phraseology, which is a lot of fun.
The one thing that is present where if a Malison, say, interbreeds with a Abomination, the brood, the clutch, will 98% of the time take on the aspects of the weaker parent, the Malison in this regard. Right?
Sure.
That's that step down. So many do try to breed up.
But it doesn't make any sense. Why would you try to breed up? Because it'll take on your own...
Again, if they have more people subservient to them, like they're young, that are a higher stage in life, then you could move your family, your little section, your little group further
So you're
ahead.
playing the lottery with it. You're trying to get the Abomination, but we're talking recessive genes then.
Yes, yeah,
Right?
very much so.
There's no reason an Abomination would breed down.
Other than to generate number, I would say, right? Like that would be the main reason.
I can picture Abominations, even Malisons breeding down with the purebloods, discovering that they've created another abomination and stomping that egg to bits.
I could see it, yeah. It's especially if there is tension there, or there's like, you could get Game of Thrones level political intrigue with Yuan-ti society.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Now, the one thing I will note is we've mentioned purebloods a bunch of times. Purebloods are the most humanoid, so you think maybe they do breed with humans quite often. I mean, they can, but they view it as reprehensible and disgusting to do so.
Yeah, man. Have you seen our dangly bits? They're not pretty.
Yeah. The only way they'll do it is if it in some way, shape, or form increases their power or influence. This is like a Yuan-ti pureblood seducing a king. Yeah. Right? That level of stuff.
Do you think that the pureblood with a human breeds true pureblood or breeds human?
I think it breeds human.
From a story perspective, I would have it always breed pureblood. So you have the advisor who seduces the queen to have the prince who is now Yuan-ti.
Oh yeah, I'm
just from a story perspective, I would be more inclined to breed Yuan-ti.
Yeah. Moving on, Yuan-ti all follow a certain code, and if you need help with
hexadecimal.
Not quite. If you need help with running your main your main Yuan-ti societies,
Python. Yes, that was a nerd joke, people.
Fuck, I hate you so much. Anyways, this code follows as suchly. All other lives are cheap.
Fuck, you are making up words. Follows as suchly. You need to know better, man.
No, I'm good. All humanoid life, including the cultists and slaves devoted to the Yuan-ti, lack any real value. They're not above poisoning children to get at parents or transforming a creature into a Broodguard to remove resistance. And a greater Yuan-ti's life is worth more than a lesser one's. Malisons are expected to sacrifice themselves for an abomination if called to do so, and society follows this with zeal. But Yuan-ti are so pragmatic, they don't risk undue lives unless it is their last resort, their last option.
I would also say that a Malison, if they could step up, would totally stab abomination.
100%, yeah. Now, this also tracks to the next step of their code, which is survival first. A Yuan-ti is not afraid to retreat or flee if battle is even slightly not going in their direction. They are pragmatic enough to recognize the turn in battle's favor and will often leave early to set up an ambush or another combat to ensure their victory another day. Friends, Yuan-ti are patient, and you need to they're not going to act rashly. They're not going to act reactionarily. If they don't,
Jesus fuck.
If they don't have, I'm doing this just to piss you off now. If they don't have the upper hand in combat, they're done. They're going to flee. Okay? The second they realize that. That's going to be really frustrating for your party, really fun for your DM.
Yeah, retreat today, win tomorrow.
Yeah. They will also go to a capture, not kill side of things with their code. A slave or broodguard is of more value than a corpse in a hallway. They straight up avoid butchery and slaughter, preferring to enslave and have dominion over their foes. Because of the high cost of life for their rituals, Yuan-ti will gather slaves en masse and keep them alive and keep them alive to build up to these rituals. These rituals, it's not just I killed this one person and become a higher step. No, we're talking hundreds of corpses involved.
Oh yeah. And just to take it one step further with the capture not kill, this is really cool because you can ambush your party with overwhelming numbers and knock them all down to 0 hit points, and then they wake up enslaved. Right? That is very much, when you are running the Yuan-ti, you have to think, what does this murder get me? It's not like goblins, which is just going to be like, fuck you, stab. Right? Like, and it's not going to be, it's not going to be,
fucked, asshole.
Yeah, exactly. It's not going to be gnolls who are in for the slaughter, or orcs who are in for the savagery, or even kobolds who are defending their land or whatnot, or lizard folk who are
just hungry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, what does this specific murder get me? Because if you are alive, I can use you.
Anyways, they will then, knowing that you're captured by them, take their time to try to convince you to join their side.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Right? And they'll do that through either seduction, brainwash, torture, or just Broodguardize you.
Yep.
Okay? Next, they depend on deceit. This is the next step of their code. Stealth, poison, patience, and manipulation are the main weapons of the Yuan-ti. They will rarely engage in full frontal combat, but instead will resort in ambush and waiting until night to attack their foes. They will wait until you are at your weakest to hit.
Of course, yep.
They are also immune to poison, so they can be a little bit less delicate when it comes to poisoning the meal of a king's great feast.
Okay, I've ranted more than once about poison and poison conditions and poisons and the way that D&D bungles this pretty hard. However, for all intents and purposes in this episode and the next one, when we say poison, we are talking about venom a lot of the time as well. So it's not just what you ingest, it's also what you get injected with, right? So it's poison and venom.
So, Adam, we do want to talk. I know sometimes we bring this up at the end, but we're going to bring it up now. Role-playing a Yuan-ti. If you are to role-play a Yuan-ti in a party of adventurers, remember always, when you're playing a race that has this kind of history, this kind of flavor to them, you could end up being very confrontational and antagonistic to your fellow players.
Oh, then you don't understand Yuan-ti if you're doing that, because Yuan-ti will agree with you. Yes, but...
I know, but they will also be the ones to backstab your party. So, rule 1, as always, is don't be a dick. But, after that, remember, they're emotionless, they're manipulative, and they believe themselves to be superior in every way to humans.
James played a Yuan-ti in an evil campaign of mine last year. We ran it for about a year.
Yeah.
And he was a Yuan-ti sorcerer who was out there to ascend to godhood. He was going to burn the world to the ground. And all the other evil characters are out for their own thing. He was building a cult. Well, we had a death cleric building a cult at the same time in the same party. And they were working together because it makes sense to get as many followers as possible. Because if we join forces, then yes, she was worshipping Nerul.
Oh, cool.
Right? Which is one of the gods of death.
Yeah, it's a rotting skull with a sickle in the
it's sigil,
holy symbol. Yeah.
So, and he teamed right up, even though his god was Dendar. And so he's like, yep, we're going to do this. This is going to be fantastic. I'm on your side. And the plan was, when we hit level 20, I'm going to murder her and take over the cult. And that is such a Yuan-ti thing to do. There's a reason to move forward with the party.
Yeah. I did want to bring up one little quote that is in Volo's when it regards this attitude. Yuan-ti feel the same way as humans feel about chickens.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Right? Wrap your head around that one for a minute. So there are only 3 types of creature to a Yuan-ti because of this. There is threat, meat, and other Yuan-ti. Most Yuan-ti see it as below themselves to talk to meat. And depending on the level of Yuan-ti, slaves are expected to understand and interpret the moods of their masters, so the Yuan-ti need not speak commands to them. The slaves are expected to anticipate their master's desires and act on them before the master puts in the effort to call it to be done.
But this is not from, I feel like people are going to have a general impulse to have that be out of a hedonistic or a laziness.
Yeah.
But that's not what this is. This is purely arrogance.
Yes, yeah. Now,
you want to know who my favorite Yuan-ti from pop culture is?
Who?
Jafar.
Oh, yes. 100%. Oh, very much yes. That fills a bunch of check marks. He 100% is a Yuan-ti Pureblood.
Yeah, Littlefinger is another one.
Yeah, and we mentioned Grima Wormtongue earlier as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Purebloods, which is going to be your playable race, so you're going to be role-playing as them, are trained to interact with outside civilizations, though. So this usually involves practice hiding their superiority complex. So they have practice. They know that they're better, but they're not going to show it to you because they know that would offend other people, and that's going to ruin their plans if they're called out. They will seduce, and they're taught seduction and manipulation techniques, as well as taking the orders of a king and how to do that with grace.
I like that they're going to have malicious compliance.
Yeah.
In a big way. Oh, you said that we should take care of them. I didn't know that didn't mean drowning them in the river. That's taking care of them.
Yeah.
Right? So the other thing about it is you said seduction. remember, that doesn't mean sexuality.
Yeah.
Seduction just means, oh, you want something? I can help you get it, right? I will ingratiate myself to give you what you want. And that doesn't necessarily mean lust and sex. This is Dungeons and Dragons. It does mean loot and magic items, right? I will help you get experience. So
finally, we're going to talk about Yuan-Ti names. They're often generational and passed down from the earliest Yuan-Ti empire, although the sibilance is often added and exaggerated to better suit their physicality or ability. So all of their names are going to have these long S's. They're going to have these very snake-like, every name has some parcel tongue to it for your Harry Potter fans.
Harry Potter.
So you'll see a lot of their names are going to come from that history there. You'll have names like Hitoti and Metzili, and they almost sound snaky and Egyptian at the same time.
Yeah, as they should. There's a lot of Egyptian iconography that's being used.
Very much so. So that is all we have for today on Yuan-Ti.
Not even close. We've got another 2 hours to go.
Yes, but we're going to talk to our friends next. So before we do that, Adam, I would like to have a commercial.
Hello, podcast people. Podcast people?
We're recording.
Yes, but it makes them sound like pod.
We're recording.
You're recording. Fuck. Hello, podcast people. We've got a couple of things going on that you might not know about, and so we thought we'd cut away to a little reminder. First of all, we just want to point everyone to our YouTube channel again.
We appreciate that all of you listen on your respective favorite podcast apps, but the It's a Mimic YouTube page has all of our shows laid out in playlists. That means you can listen to our Dragon episodes back to back, or dig through the campaign builder or touring the multiverse series without scrolling through the backlog or having to use a search function.
New episodes get uploaded within a week of airing on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever, but the whole backlog is up there.
Even the episodes we're embarrassed about.
Yeah, fuck, those early cold opens were sloppy.
Yeah.
And delicious.
The other thing we want to mention...
Hey, Dan, you know what else is sloppy but delicious?
Whatever you're going to say next is just going to get cut, so...
Well,
the other thing we want to mention is our sneaky little store that lives an unassuming little life on our website.
There are stickers, magnets, phone cases, notebooks...
Cups, water bottles, coffee mugs, and travel mugs.
Wait, I could have a mug?
I'm tired of your ugly mug already, man.
I want a mug.
We even have masks in a variety of sizes because we're socially conscious people. The current designs are for the It's a Mimic mic and the Deep Dark Irradiance logo, but we'll be updating the store as time goes on.
How big are the mugs?
I don't know. There's a standard one and a tall one.
And a travel mug too. Jesus, I need to look at this website more often.
So please take a second to check out what we have to offer. We really appreciate the donations we've received through the website, but we want to make sure that you guys have the option of getting something for your hard-earned money. Every little bit helps keep the lights on and the side projects rolling, and we love you for your support. So thank you to everyone out there who visits www.itsamimic.com and checks out our online store there.
Hey, there's even a little pin with the logo on it.
And don't forget to check out the YouTube channel for perusing the older episodes. Now, without any further delay, let's head back to the show.
Jesus, there are 3 different kinds of stickers, Dan. We are capitalist whores.
Will you please take these damn commercials seriously?
No.
Welcome back. So, Adam, with a society of incredibly selfish people, what does a neutral evil society look like to you?
It's interesting because, again, we hit cults. And every time that we run into a cult, I always say, that's lawful evil. They're following the rules for a basic objective.
Especially the Yuan-Ti, where that basic objective is following very specific established rituals for one person to ascend to a next step.
I think the reason that these guys are neutral evil is because they will break law and order in order to get what they want.
Yes.
So they will follow the rules because they choose to, and then they will break them when they need to or want to.
Yeah.
And it is pure evil. I think you don't get more ultimate evil than I'm gonna sacrifice 100 people and eat half of them.
I mean, yeah.
Right. So that's why neutral evil is really true evil in a lot of ways, right?
I remember back in the day where lawful evil was the most evil because it's conniving and it's very intentionally evil. Nah, man.
No, in 5th edition, neutral evil takes that.
Yeah, just like neutral good is the most good in my mind.
Yes, these are the pinnacles. The way that neutral or lawful neutral is the most lawful. Right?
Yeah.
So this is as evil as it's going to be. They're not reveling in the destruction and the torture and the fear.
They're
the way
all
that
a means
are.
to an end.
Yeah, and that end is literally to destroy the world. That is their end goal.
Oh yes, yeah.
Which I'm going to get into that with the gods next episode. All right, but that's the game plan. That's the end goal here.
Yeah, complete dominion and destruction. Yeah. It also seems that every single creature with scales in D&D speaks Draconic. Why? What do you feel about this, Adam?
I don't like it. I absolutely hate it. There's nothing in it about them being with talking with dragons. What the fuck is that?
Draconic just snake speak? Is that what we're trying to say? Like it's just lizard
I hate this.
speak?
Do its own thing. Have a Yuan-ti language and just fucking move on.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. Like this reliance. I've said and will say that dragons in D&D 5e are disappointing monsters.
By the stat block.
By the stat blocks.
By the lore, they're fine, but
Yeah. To really pull a lot of attention to them with stuff like this feels weird to me. And I get it. I mean, the second noun in the freaking title of this game is dragon, so we should highlight them. But if we're going to highlight them, let's put a little bit more effort into their stat blocks, please.
It's very telling that every time that you get a named dragon in D&D, every single time they have an additional ability.
Yep.
That means that the basic stat block for dragons is lacking.
It almost feels like the basic stat block for dragons is a template that they're expecting you to build off of.
Yeah, all the blue ones can do this. Now add lightning shit, right?
Yeah.
But there's nothing in the monster manual that says that, or any book that says to do that, so.
But we see, one of the reasons why we do a lot of these breakdowns and do a lot of these stat block coverages is to see the intention behind the rules, right? We like to see where their pattern is, what the design choices were, and this feels like one of those design choices where dragons are supposed to be your big bad evil guys. So we're going to give you a lot of things that point toward them, but don't just use the main stat blocks, go beyond it, right? And having all scaly kind being able to speak Draconic is just one of those things. Now, the only feature that also runs true through all of the type of Yuan-ti is the fact that they are immune to both poison damage and the poison condition. We mentioned this earlier. How would you use this creatively, Adam?
I don't feel the need to, because poison is so underutilized from the player standpoint in 5th edition that this is... Look, people sometimes like to build a poisoner type, archetype character.
Yeah.
And for rogues specifically, they like to do that. And that's all well and good. Warn them not to do that for this campaign, because there's just no fucking point.
Yeah.
Don't pull a fast one over your players on this one, because it's...
You see, there really, in my mind, there are two societies that are so heavily focused on poisoning and this underhanded, conniving...
Drow and Yuan-ti.
Yeah. Right?
But also...
Drow aren't immune to poison.
No, some of them are.
Well, okay.
But additionally, there's a lot of devils and demons and fiends and hags, and there's a lot of stuff. Poison is the most common resistance and immunity that exists, besides the...
Slashing, piercing, bludgeoning versus non-magical items.
Yeah. So that's the most common, and then it's poison, and then it's fire. But our guys tend to rely on fire. Fireball, obviously.
Well, fire is also the most present element in spells.
Right. But poison isn't.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, there's what?
Poison spray and then a couple of other stinky clouds.
Yeah.
Right? But I'm going to rename it. Stinky clouds.
Just a bunch of farts.
I'm going to call this Downwind from Dan.
You're welcome.
Man, you guys don't know what it's like being trapped in a fucking room with him week in and week out. Anyway, so...
You also don't know how fucking my cleaning schedule goes after Adam leaves. I gotta wipe down every surface to remove the stink.
I just made a stink joke about you, Dan.
I know. It goes two ways, Adam.
It doesn't make any sense. Your stench overpowers mine by a fucking sight.
Are you sure about that?
Oh, yeah, you are nose blind to your own.
Speaking about being nose blind, quick little divergence. My wife made baby corn the other day for the family, because my kids, when we get Chinese food, they love eating baby corn.
Sure.
It stank up the house so bad.
Baby corn stinks.
Oh, buddy, Shannon and I did not know this, but it smelled like 3-day-old ball sweat. Like, it was just the worst, and it permeated everywhere.
Yeah. No. My big look, your stank is because you get home after work, from a physical job, and then we sit in this closed room, and I die a little.
And I'm not allowed to put on a fan because y'all hear it.
Yeah, pretty much. Anyway, so I forget what I was saying. Oh, poison damage. When it comes to poison damage and the poisoned condition, welcome to It's a Mimic, where we go off on tangents. The simple fact of the matter is, it's a non-starter. It doesn't matter to me because the players will have learned by now not to rely on this shit. And when they use their cantrip poison spray twice and realize, oh, it's never going to work on Yuan-Ti, they will just never do it again. Mm-hmm. So you've done it against purebloods and broodguards and cultists at this point. You're not doing this to the Malisons. You're not doing it to the Abominations. You're not doing it to any of the weird Volos versions of them. Like, you're just not.
Yeah.
So why even fucking bother with this? It's, of course they would have it. I would be annoyed if they didn't have this immune to poison, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, ultimately, this does not affect my game.
So, Adam, we did want to talk about some physical variations when it comes to Yuan-Ti.
Yeah, they got this really cool chart in Volos, or it's a series of random tables, actually. In order to keep the different Yuan-Ti separate from each other, easy to identify when you're describing them, because Snake Person only goes so far.
Yeah.
We actually have a number of different tables, including... these are all random tables. There's a D20 table the snake body type, which is thick, normal, and sleek.
Oh, okay. So, we're anaconda, python.
Like an asp.
Asp, and I guess the sleek is the asp?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And garden snakes are relatively sleek as opposed to these big constrictors.
We don't have a lot of snakes locally. There's gardener snakes occasionally, and that's it.
Yeah.
Right? But we don't live
I'm cool with it.
Oh, me too. I remember camping in, we have an area here called the Okanagan that has some deserty patches to it.
And also a freaking Ogopogo.
And also Ogopogo. But I was camping there once and heard the rattling of a rattlesnake and just was like, okay, nope, and walked away. Got the fuck out of town.
It was just me behind a bush with a fucking maraca.
Probably.
And then, all right, so you also get a D20 table for the humanoid skin color, which is mostly browns. Just what kind of brown? Is it a greenish brown or a reddish brown or a brownish brown?
Okay.
You get scale color as well. So there's skin color, but then there's scale color as well. And when you get into the purebloods and the Malisons, you're going to have some of both, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So the scale color really covers absolutely the entire gamut, with the exception of your pinks and purples, right? But all of your natural colors appear on there, and that's a D100.
Yeah, okay.
For the scale pattern, you get mottled, random, reticulated, speckled, and striped.
Care to explain some of those? What is a reticulated scale pattern?
I don't know, man. You're making me look it up now. You look it up.
Oh, that's the diamond pattern.
Well, not exactly. It's like the python. It's the camo splotches that you see. Yeah. So it can be diamond, but it doesn't necessarily have to be.
So I looked up what a reticulated python looks like, and the first image is a reticulated python. Cool. The second image is a snake handler noping the fuck out of being attacked by a python.
The next one, which is really fun, is the Yuan-Ti tongue color. And while you may think that this is a weird thing to add, when you look at the purebloods specifically, they say in the lore, oh, you're going to have something like your eyes may have the snake slits, or it could be the color of your tongue. So you actually get some options like an orange, a blue, or a black tongue.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Is it forked?
It could be.
Cool.
You get eye color, which runs the gamut as well.
Yeah.
Your snake head shape.
This harkens back to the cold open. Is it king cobra? Is it...
Penis.
Is
it bulbous is the question? No, is it broad and rounded, flattened, hooded? That was your question in the cold open. Slender or triangular? Like the python triangular.
Oh, yeah.
And then you actually have a bunch of different specific tables for the different kinds of Yuan-Ti as well, which the guys are going to get into.
So First up in those is Dave, who's going to be covering the Pureblood from Eberron.
Hey guys, Dave here. I'm still hanging out in the jungles of Kibara. You know, through my experiences here, I've came across a new kind of creature that I wanted to talk about, and that is the Yuan-ti, and more specifically, purebloods. Now, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but the Yuan-ti live in kind of like a caste system, and the purebloods are kind of the lowest on the totem pole when it comes to this. They are also the kind of Yuan-ti that more closely resemble humans. However, if you like really kind of get in and look at them, you're going to be able to tell the difference. There's always some little hint about who they really are and what they really are. Maybe it'll be like a scaly patches or something they're hiding under their clothing. Maybe they got funny eyes or, you know, sharp pointy teeth or something like that, right? They do often try to cover up their identity and pass as humans to infiltrate civilizations and, you know, cities and stuff. Maybe local governments, maybe small towns, maybe big towns. They are also known to kidnap people for interrogation and sacrifice, so that's fun. But they are willing to trade with anyone who has something that they value, something that will further what they're about. So like I said, the Yuan-ti purebloods are the most abundant of the Yuan-ti. Because they can easily pass as a human, their job is really to act as the agents of the Yuan-ti society and interact with everything that's going on around them, you know, the outside world. They are able to live in these other societies and pass off as humans, but they do this not just because it's fun, but they do it in order to gain power and influence in the local government, I guess you could call it. They do like to surround themselves in luxury. Like I said, they're trying to climb up a little bit, and because they're able to pass as the humans, this is relatively easy for them. However, when they do get called home to report on what's going on and, you know, further the agenda of the Yuan-ti, they do become quite resentful as they have to kind of go back and, you know, live at the bottom of the caste system again. So like I said before, the Yuan-ti can have this humanoid, I mean, they are humanoids. They look like humans, but they can have a couple of snake-like traits. For instance, the pureblood, they have a table here it's a D20 table, and it's for different pureblood characteristics. You can have fangs, you can have a forked tongue, scaly face, serpentine eyes. You know, there's all sorts of different things you can do with them. There's not much to it, though, because, again, these are supposed to be subtle features that could be easily missed from afar. Now, the Yuan-ti pureblood are, like I said, again, the lowest on the Yuan-ti totem pole. Their AC represents that. It's only an 11. They've got 9d8 hit points. That is 9d8 hit points. And their speed's 30 feet. Their strength's a little above average, as is their dex and con. Their intelligence, wisdom, and charisma is a little above that, but nothing is below an 11, and nothing is higher than a 14. So they're a little above average, but just about in every way, although they're not good at any one particular thing. Their skills are Deception +6, Perception +3, and a Stealth of +3. They are immune to poison and the poisoned condition. They got dark vision out to 60 feet and a passive perception of 13, and they speak Abyssal, Common, and Draconic. These guys are a CR1. They're not that difficult, although they do have a load of hit points for level 1, or for a CR1. These guys also have innate spellcasting. Their spellcasting ability is Charisma, so the save DC is 12, because, again, their Charisma is their highest at a 14. And they can cast the following spells with no material components. They can cast Animal Friendship on snakes only at will, and 3 times per day they can cast Poison Spray or Suggestion. Now that's 3 times each, okay? So, you know, they can do a mix of that. They do have magic resistance, so they have advantage on saving throws against spells and other magical effects. When it comes to their actions, they do have a multi-attack, which is just 2 swings of their scimitar, which is a +3 to hit, and it does 1d6 +1 slashing damage. So, although they got a pile of hit points, they're not going to do a heck of a lot of damage in the meantime. They do also get a short bow for a ranged attack, which is just a +3 to hit, and it does 1d6 +1 damage, plus it does 2d6 poison damage. So that's how you're going to be able to deal a lot of damage with these guys. Is I like the idea of having them hanging out on rooftops or in trees or whatever, and shooting arrows down to kind of throw off the party a little bit. Now, they do have another ability that's kind of interesting called Shape Changer, and this is only for the purebloods. they can use an action to polymorph into a medium giant poisonous snake or into a large constrictor snake. And then they can go back to their true form again with the use of an action. Their statistics are the same in each form except for the size change. Any equipment that they're wearing or carrying isn't transformed, and it doesn't change form if it dies. So if it dies as a snake, it stays as a snake, which I don't think there's too many things that actually do that, so that's kind of neat. The Purebloods also get a bite action, which is a melee weapon attack. It's a +3 to hit, and it does 1d4 piercing, plus 1d6 poison. If the Pureblood uses multi-attack, it can only use the bite attack once. So it would be bite, sword, right? That's how you get your multi-attack out of that. So these guys are neat. I think that a lot of the time I try to inject some sort of espionage or secret spy stuff into what I'm doing, and just it always keeps my guys guessing a little bit. And I think that the Yuan-Ti are perfect for this. They come in all different shapes and sizes and patterns and whatnot, and that can really be used to your advantage. Again, I like the idea of these guys sitting on rooftops, shooting arrows down, forcing your players to take cover. And everybody's done that. Come into town. Things are weird. Talk to the mayor. The mayor seems off. This is what these guys are going to excel at. These are what they are for. They can come into your society. They can turn it upside down. They can kind of take control of it from the inside. And then when everything's going to hell and your players are a higher level, there are more that you can pile into this to keep it interesting. It's not just the regular run-of-the-mill, half snake people, because they're not really half snakes as the Pureblood. They have snake-like qualities, but they're not like that. Anyways, at this point, I'm going to send it back to Adam and Dan. Thanks, guys. And if you guys want to get a hold of me, you can find me on the subreddit r/it'samimic. Thanks, guys. I will catch you later.
Now, for those of you keeners who are following along with the monster manual, the idea of Purebloods getting a shape changer trait or bite abilities may seem totally out of left field, but those details are buried in Yuan-Ti lore in Volos.
Yeah, in this section, there is a whole list of special traits and abilities that you can add for even further variations beyond that the physical traits that I listed a few minutes ago.
I kind of wish that we had this kind of option with other monsters and playable races even. Like, that might just be my Pathfinder sneaking in, where I want there to be some more, like,
for someone
optional racial traits and
for someone who is so guilty of suffering from analysis paralysis, adding more.
Oh, I look at my history playing games like Pathfinder as one of the reasons why I like having that stuff, but also suffer the analysis paralysis. Yeah.
So anyway, one of the crazy interesting things about the shape changer trait is that there's no cap on how many times a day that a pureblood can do this.
Yikes.
Yep, and the fact that they don't revert to their true form upon death is kind of fun. You can drop a large dead snake in the middle of a missing persons case, and it's a great way to throw in a red herring into your mystery investigations plot.
Oh, I like that. Like, if it gets out that you are a Yuan-Ti Pureblood and that you are...
Oh, I would Sherlock Holmes it, right? Like, your party is called to find out some noble was murdered and whatnot, and the only evidence is a broken window and a large dead snake.
I mean, the fact that they can also cast suggestion adds to this.
Yeah, and so
right, because like they'll also manipulate the crowd a little bit to figure it out, or the individuals who are the hottest on their trails.
Yes, but you're missing the point. The murderer is there and dead, and your guys won't know it because they turned into a snake, were killed by town guards.
Oh yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
And now your guys are on a wild goose chase looking for the murderer, and this is how you uncover a bigger Yuan-Ti plot. And they're like, well, we never did find the murderer, and we'll see which one of the PCs can
makes
put
the
it
connection.
Together.
Yeah. Okay. No, I like that. Back to this idea of suggestion. They do get the ability to cast this 3 times a day as an inherent ability. Really ties together this whole idea that they are manipulators of mass amounts of people. Do you think there's any additional reason for this?
Yeah, they're about manipulators. It's in their lore. My problem is with the hypnosis that is given to snakes in general. This is a Jungle Book fucking detail, and I don't like it, right? I like Ka having that ability in Jungle Book, sure, fine. But snakes are the ones that get charmed. You are a snake charmer.
Yeah.
You are not charmed by a snake. I don't like this flavor in my snake shit, and it's all over Yuan-Ti. So I've accepted it as a Yuan-Ti thing, but I hate it for general snaky nonsense.
I would rather see it in Naga than Yuan-Ti.
Sure, man. Fuck, give it to flying snakes. Give it to coatls. Give it to all the other snaky shit that's out there. But Yuan-Ti being able to just... I mean, I know that they are infiltrating societies and whatnot, but the fact that they're going to use this shit on each other, left, right, and center, because they inherently get it, even the purebloods, when you get turned into a pureblood, you now have this magical ability to do this, seems a little bullshit to me. I just don't like it, thematically.
Yeah.
The thing that actually stands out to me about the stat block is the inherent power of their short bow. That's where I look at. I mean, besides the... when they do get in a fight, it's weird to me. I don't like purebloods getting into a fight. They're going to run, right?
Yeah.
Granted, they don't get to use the multi-attack with it, but the fact that the purebloods take the time to obviously poison their arrows ahead of time just goes to show you that they're thinking about distance fighting over melee. Because there's no reason for the arrows to have poison on them, especially because in the DMG it says if you put poison on an arrow, I think it's a DMG, if you poison an arrow, it lasts an hour.
Yeah.
Which means they're doing this all of the time, or they've got some sort of special thing to it.
Application process that,
Or special poison or venom or whatever, but there's no details anywhere in that. And if they're doing that and your players pick up these special poison arrows, now you got to deal with that shit.
Well, this goes to the fact that, I mean, when you see this plus the deception and everything else that they got going to them, they don't want a fair fight.
No.
Right? They're going to want to run away and shoot from range. They don't want you, a lesser chicken form, to hurt them or mar them in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Look, these guys are spies. They're assassins. They're diplomats. They're not front row fighters.
Yeah. I mean, they have slaves in Broodguard to be the front line, right?
Well, the Broodguard isn't even front line. The Broodguard hides back and protects the eggs. That is their sole...
they guard the brood.
Yeah, that is their sole purpose.
Speaking of Broodguard, Terry, who is a self-described Slytherin, is covering Yuan-Ti Broodguard in the Green Dragon Inn.
Okay, thanks Adam and Dan for passing it back over to me, over the Green Dragon Inn. I'm drinking Harp Lager today. So today I'm covering the Yuan-Ti Broodguard. Another good one for me. Now, Broodguard is not the prettiest of fantasy creatures. For those that play D&D with me, they know that I like my fantasy gaming to be attractive. I don't like to be surrounded by ugly things. I very much subscribe to that whole beautiful elf type fantasy gaming. I'm okay with that. Okay, but Broodguards. So these are humanoids that are transformed into very simple-minded, scaly, ugly, singular-minded, task-orientated creatures for their Yuan-Ti overlords. Now, what happens is these humanoids, they're typically, prisoners or, people that have been captured for whatever reason by Yuan-Ti or enslaved for them by them. They're made to take this magical brew that prevents them from fighting back, incapacitates them, so that they can be transformed into these creatures. And that magical brew itself is something that you can play with as a DM, because if you think, Yuan-Ti, they're typically out in the jungle in their pyramids and doing all of their sacrifices and stuff. There's going to be an element of herbalism and alchemy that comes with that, and that's an area that can be explored. Don't just gloss over that. That can become part of your campaign. It can even be a reward, a magic item that becomes part of the game for the players. But anyway, okay, so that's what a Broodguard is. So let's take a look at what it means to be a Broodguard. Medium humanoid, neutral evil, and I agree with that. I don't think these they're not chaotic evil because they're singular in their mission, right? Simple-minded. They have a single task that they're doing. It might be guard the eggs. It might be patrol this area. It might be look out for this particular thing and attack this creature. Even though Broodguards will typically attack anything that is not reptilian. That's important to know. It's important to know. But they're certainly neutral in that. They're not lawful evil for me because they don't have this big overarching code or agenda that they stick to. It's very simple tasks that they are instructed to follow. Armor class, they have natural armor, 14. Hit points, 78 plus 14. That averages out of 45. They've got that standard speed of 30 feet. Looking at their stats here, as you might imagine, intelligence is low, way below average. So is charisma. Okay, their ability to interpret people's actions or communicate or understand people is going to be low. That's why their charisma is low. However, their wisdom, so their understanding of the world around them, is slightly above that of an average human, slightly above what you or I would have. That's important to know, because they may be, and I've said this about other creatures before, of academically low intelligence and problem solving, but their understanding of what is going on around them is not low. They understand what you are, that you are an enemy. They recognize what humans smell like. They understand what a group of people sounds like that's approaching. They would understand if something was hostile. That is slightly higher than an average human in the real world. Saving throws, we've got strength, dexterity, wisdom. Skills, perception, +2 for that. Damage immunities, poison, sure, yeah, makes sense. Condition immunities, poisoned. Senses, we have dark vision of 60 feet, because it's 5th edition, everything's got dark vision, to quote Adam, and I agree with him. Passive perception of 12. Languages, abyssal, common, and draconic. There's no statement here that says they only understand that. By the text, they can speak and understand abyssal, common, and draconic. Challenge rating of 2. Let's look at their abilities here. Mental resistance, I like this. The Broodguard has advantage on saving throws against being charmed, and magic cannot paralyze it. I like it, and I agree with it. There's no issues here for me with that, and I really don't think there should be. Somebody might have a case where they find that that's important, but I don't even think it's important enough to argue. Yeah, sure, can't be charmed, and magic can't paralyze it. Reckless, this is an important ability for them. So at the start of its turn, the Broodguard can gain advantage on all melee attack rolls it makes during that turn, but attack rolls against it have advantage until the start of its next turn. Okay, so here's an idea, DMs. You need to capitalize on this. This Yuan-Ti Broodguard is there for a specific mission. It does not have the care for its own life like you or I have. It is not necessarily looking both ways before it crosses the street. What's more important to it is that it kills the thing that it thinks is a threat on the other side of the street. So you have to go into these combats and these encounters thinking like that. Do not think that they will think like you. Preservation of their own life is not important. It is the task that they've been given that's important. So naturally, they will take whatever advantage they can get on attacking and killing the thing in front of it, even if, consequently, it maybe creates a disadvantage for them in a different way that they may not consider because they're single-minded and thinking about the task ahead. It's important. I think it's important. It shouldn't be overlooked. So for actions, they have a multi-attack. The Broodguard makes 3 attacks, 1 with its bite and 2 with its claws. This is going to go hand in hand with the Reckless ability. And bite attack, it's 1d8 +2 piercing damage. Claw attack, it's 1d6 +2 slashing damage. Okay, sure. Okay, so here's how I think that these things need to be played out. Their behavior, yes, is going to be somewhat predictable, providing that you've studied it. Okay, if you've never come across these things before, just because you know what they are from playing D&D previously, play the game. Don't be meta with this. But the way that they should be played is that they are going to understand the threats around them. Okay, and they're going to be reckless in attacking and putting down what they believe is the biggest threat to what their mission is, whether it's protecting eggs, keeping a certain area safe, whatever they identify in front of them. You have your 5 players. They go, that one, from their understanding of the world, is likely to cause the most damage. I'm going to go after and kill that thing. So if you have an encounter where you maybe have 2 Broodguards and Yuan-Ti and a single Yuan-Ti maybe overlooking them, this is where those Broodguards are going to be going after what they think is the biggest threat. They're going to be on it like shit off a stick on this thing, reckless, 3 multi-attacks, trying to put a single creature, the biggest threat, down immediately. So what happens here is you may get your spellcasters now are quickly going to be overwhelmed. The martial classes that are in the group are going to have to be very reactive, and they're going to have to protect those spellcasters, so their turn is going to be spent probably going into melee with these things. And then now the battle is taking place further away from the Yuan-Ti or the enemy spellcaster, which is outside. So if you do well on initiative, even though they're a low challenge rating, as players, you may be immediately on the back foot here. You may be immediately on the back foot because they're going to play the game that they want the game to be played, the way they want the game to be played, which is 3 attacks from a multi-attack, coupled with Reckless, on what they deem to be the biggest threat. You're spending your whole turn being reactive to that. Eyes are not on the spellcaster, which is further away, and you've got to be conscious of this. You've got to be conscious of this because it can very quickly turn sour, even though they don't seem like they should be a big enough threat. But that's the Yuan-Ti Broodguard. Okay, lots of ways to use them very creatively, depending on the environment that you put them in. If you put these creatures in an enclosed space where it's difficult to move around them and capitalize on movement, things can go wrong quickly, but it's going to make for a very exciting encounter. I'm looking forward to using them. Okay, that's it from me on the Yuan-Ti Broodguard. Back over Adam and Dan. I'll chat to you guys soon. Find me on Instagram at VanCityTerry, and I'll talk to you later.
Okay, so again, we talked about Broodguard really briefly, but for those of you who don't have Volos, Broodguard are these hunchbacked looking scaly lizard creatures. They got large fangs protruding from their lower jaws, almost like tusks. They got thick scaly skin, large nasty claws, and they used to be human.
So Terry mentions that these guys are intensely hostile towards any non-reptilian creature. Do you include the scaly kind that we've talked about a couple times, the dragonborns, the kobolds, fairy dragons into this mix?
No, absolutely not. It's going to be the most, maybe dragonborn, but no, they're going to...
Do they hesitate with dragonborn but still go for it?
The dragonborn will be the lowest priority.
Okay, yeah.
You know, if the party's moving together all at once, they'll target the elf and the dwarf. Like, they will hate the skinned creatures before the scaled creatures.
Yes.
But these are still not Yuan-Ti. And the Broodguard, I think, would know that.
Yeah, okay. That's fair.
Also, considering that the Broodguards are created to be guardians of the eggs, Terry is right. The reckless feature makes a lot of sense about how it throws caution to the wind to achieve its goals.
Okay.
But because of the above average wisdom stat, I would guess that they could determine threats enough to be able to position themselves between the intruders and the largest number of eggs, or prioritize escaping with a kidnapped egg, right, instead of standing and fighting to the death.
Yeah.
Right. Their priority is always the eggs. And as you said earlier, there are going to be some eggs that are of higher caste than others, and the Broodguards would know that.
Oh, yeah. They'd be like, that one there is an anathema egg in the making. We're grabbing that.
Well, there's no such thing.
An abomination egg,
Yeah.
right? And we'll take that and go.
Yeah.
Right? Also, as Terry said before, these guys are made from captured humanoids, but the flavor text really leans hard on the idea that they prefer to do this to humans, specifically humans. Doing this, though, elevates the Broodguard to like an alpha slave over the rest. Purebloods won't give a second thought to commanding these creatures to commit a suicidal action, but if there are other slaves around, the slaves are going to get to do that action first.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. They'll use up the others.
They are like... I don't know why we mentioned Slytherin earlier, so I'm in a very Harry Potter frame of mind, but they're like the house goblin or whatever it is. But
the house elf.
House elf, yeah.
Fuck, Dan, watch the movies.
So they're like a house elf, but the one with a sock, right? Like he's just that step above the rest.
I apologize to everyone, just everyone, for what just came out of Dan.
The one with it, is it not a sock? Is it like a glove or something?
So... your entire fucking metaphor is absolutely wrong. He is not better than the others by any means.
Well, I mean, someone obviously liked him enough to give him a sock. You have Monster. No one's given Monster a sock, whatever his name is.
Monster? I don't even know what you're trying to say.
What's the like grumpy one that they meet in the folding house?
Fuck. All right. Moving right along because I'm about to rage at you. Jesus, you fucking son of a... Look, okay. As a DM, I love the Broodguard. Okay? Because it's got some good body horror attached to it.
Yep.
But I fully expect the details of how to make a Broodguard to be just another hand-waved ritual that only exists in the flavor text when I came across it the first time. But you can imagine my surprise when I discovered that there's actually a breakdown for this. So here's what it is. The subject is force-fed the brew, the elixir that you mentioned before.
Yep.
That Terry also mentioned. And then they have to do a single DC 15 con save to stop the effects. On a success, they take 4d6 poison damage.
On a success.
On a success.
I'd also like to mention that DC 15 con save is not small.
No, and you're probably tier 1 and tier 2. People will fail this.
Yes.
On a failure, your character begins to change. You'll notice there are no other saves. It's the 1.
Yikes.
1d6 plus 6 days later, so up to 12 days. The transformation is complete, and they cannot be cured short of a wish spell.
How would you cure it in the interim as a DM? Is there a way? You get the 1 save, but if you fail that, you have 1d6 plus 6 days before you turn into...
No, it is happening.
Yeah, it's happening. So the second they fail that save, only a wish spell works?
Oh, no.
Or is there an
once-
intermediate?
Once it's complete... Okay, so hold on. Anytime before that,
Oh, okay.
it says right in the rules, less restoration or remove curse or other magics like that can reverse the process and cure the subject.
Cool.
I'm going to say that you need less restoration or remove curse at a low level for the first few days. When you get into the later stages of it, you need greater restoration or remove curse, but you need a 6th level spell slot to do it.
Yeah.
Something like that, right? And I'm going to slowly transform that player character or that NPC as we go.
Basically, you're not letting your paladin walk over and expend 5 points of his lay on hands to get rid of this thing.
He's got an hour to do it, and I think the UNT are smart enough to know that would keep the Broodguard separate for a couple hours.
Okay, cool. I like that. Now, I don't expect that you're going to run into any fewer than a handful of these at a time.
No.
Right? I mean, they're CR2, so they're not anything to really laugh at, but I think they're going to move in packs. The action economy is going to work against your party. As we've said with most of the Yuan-Ti, they err towards the action economy being in their favor, and it's going to be really evident with the amount of Broodguard they have.
Yes.
Right? So, moving on, we are going to see Brad covering the Yuan-Ti Abomination from the Yawning Portal.
Thanks, Adam and Dan. Well, I want to talk to you today about Yuan-Ti, specifically the abominations of the Yuan-Ti. These are some fascinating creatures, and I'll try not to go too long with them, but I could talk about these for quite a while. So, Yuan-Ti abominations are pretty near the pinnacle of Yuan-Ti civilization. This is what Yuan-Ti aspire to be, and this is really the closest that they get to their gods, to their masters. There's only one step above Yuan-Ti abominations, and it's basically a bigger, badder Yuan-Ti abomination. But for your average Yuan-Ti, this is the pinnacle. This is what you strive for. Yuan-Ti abominations are large monstrosities. They're shape changers. They are Yuan-Ti. And they are, to describe them, they're basically, imagine the body of a snake with the upper torso of a humanoid, but still covered in snake scales, with a snake head. These things are like the snake version of a centaur, if you will, but rather than having flesh anywhere, there is no flesh whatsoever. It is snake tail into a humanoid torso, but it's still snake-like, with arms and then with a snake-like head. They tend to carry a scimitar and a longbow, and they are very capable at doing both. They often have those strapped to their upper torso, as obviously it would be very difficult to put a belt around a snake, so they generally tend to keep things strapped to the upper torso. These things move fairly quickly. They're snakes. They move faster than your humans will move. They're going to move 40 feet. They've got 127 hit points, or 15d10 plus 45 if you choose to do so. They don't wear any armor, but they have a natural AC of 15. They are skilled in both perception and stealth, immune to poison, have dark vision, just like everything, and they speak Abyssal, Common, and Draconic. These things have a CR of 7. They are not pushovers, and it's not uncommon to have a few of these in the same space. I mean, these things aren't super common. They're not the bulk of your Yuan-Ti army, but they're not so rare that it's impossible to see a few of them in one place. As far as stats go, Yuan-Ti abominations have an incredibly high strength, a good dex, a good con, good int, good wisdom, and really high charisma. These things are going to be way higher than your average human in every single aspect. There's not a single stat that they have lower than, let's say, a +3 in. So these things are powerful. While I describe them as being snake-like with a torso, they actually do have the ability called Shape Changer, and they can use their action to polymorph into a large snake So different from some of the others, many of Yuan-Ti can transform into a snake. Theirs specifically is a large snake, and it can transform back to its regular form. It doesn't state specifically, but I believe it would take an action to do so. As a fun fact, as it changes forms, it says any equipment that it's wearing or carrying is not transformed. However, I think I can imagine transforming into a snake, unless it is somehow strapped to the body in a way where it won't be knocked loose. I would rule it that if they had anything in their hands as they transformed, they would be dropped and they would not be able to pick it up until they turned back into their abomination form. Abominations do come with innate spellcasting, which can only be done when they're in the abomination form. Obviously, when they are in their snake form, they cannot cast these spells. At will, they can cast animal friendship on snakes and snakes only. 3 times a day, they can cast suggestion, and once a day, they can cause fear. That said, as a party member, if I saw this as a player, I would probably have a little bit of fear in me for sure. They come with magic resistance, so they have advantage on any saving throws against spells and other magical effects. They are able to make a multi-attack in their abomination form, which means that they get 2 ranged attacks or 3 melee attacks. Note that is different, so it's not just 2 attacks. It's 2 ranged or 3 melee, but it can use, we'll go into a couple more of them, but it has a bite and a constrict attack, and each of those it can use only once per turn. So don't try and make, 3 melee attacks using bite and constrict. You can do 1 of each of those, and then a scimitar attack if you wish, or you could do 2 longbow attacks. So their bite attack is a melee attack with +7 to hit, and it's going to do 1d6 plus 4 piercing damage plus 10 poison damage. So it is quite a formidable attack. You'll probably want to be using this. Constrict is its other natural ability. It's a melee weapon attack as well with +7 to hit, 10-foot reach, and it does 2d6 plus 4 bludgeoning damage. The target will be grappled with an escape, so there's no actual save on the constrict itself. However, on your turn, you will then be able to make a escape action, which is a DC 14 check, and until the grapple ends, you will be considered restrained. So that means that any attacks, melee attacks, will have advantage against you. You will have disadvantage on any of your attacks. So be wary. Do not let these things constrict you, because you're going to have a really bad time. Oh, you also have disadvantage on dexterity saving throws. So be wary of being caught in an abomination's constrict. Like I said, they carry 2 weapons. They carry a scimitar and a longbow. So with the scimitar, again, +7 to hit, and it's going to do 2d6 plus 4 slashing damage. So likely, if you're using these optimally, you're only going to be making 1 attack with the scimitar. You'll probably make 1 bite and 1 constrict attack, as the scimitar is your lowest damaging attack. But that said, it's still going to do 2d6 plus 4 slashing damage with a +7 hit, so they're fairly formidable with the scimitar. They're also armed with a longbow, allowing them to make a ranged weapon attack for +6 with a range of up to 150 feet or 600 with disadvantage. And they do 2d8 plus 3 piercing damage plus 10 poison damage. So watch out for the poison damage. They do poison the tips of their arrows. These things are vicious. They also get a couple extra special maneuvers that they're able to use. You'll find these in Volos. They have the trait called Acid Slime. These are ones that are optional. So not necessarily all Yuan-Ti will have it, or abominations will have it, but that said, you're probably going to want to use these as a dungeon master. So, first ability they have is called Polymorph into Snake. It has a recharge time of 6 rounds, but they can target a creature, and they have to succeed on a wisdom saving throw, or they will be polymorphed into a tiny poisonous snake. So similar, it's exactly like the polymorph attack, but they can only transform you into a tiny poisonous snake. And the DC will be the same as their other spell casting abilities. They also have one more ability, which is really interesting. 2 more abilities, sorry. They have Snake Antipathy. So basically, it's a fear, effectively. And what happens is, once every 6 turns, they can target a creature within 60 feet. You have to succeed on wisdom saving throw, or else you are effectively afraid of these things. You feel this urge to run from them. You cannot move towards them. You have to move away from them, and you will be frightened as long as you can see it. So if you can move around a corner and get out of sight, you won't be affected, but as long as you can see them, you will suffer from the frightened condition. And the last ability that they can have is Sticks to Snakes. So that once every 6 turns again, they can transform a pile of sticks, arrows, or anything made of wood into a swarm of poisonous snakes. And the swarm acts under the command of the Yuan-Ti Abomination. That's a lot of abilities that these things pack. With a CR of 7, if played well, I think they can be even a little more dangerous than their CR lets on. These things are fantastic, and I can't wait to get my hands on some of these and throw them at a party and see how you would deal with them, because they really are a formidable foe. You're going to want to keep them at distance. You're not going to want them to let them get this bite or constrict attack on you. But that said, their longbow's attacks are nothing to scoff at either. And with the ability to change into snakes, they're going to be able to hide in plain sight within a forest or a jungle. They're going to be hard to detect. They're naturally going to have a pretty good idea of their surroundings, and they're going to be able to get the jump on you. These things are really powerful. So I'd love to hear from you guys how you might use them, what you think of them, if you've ever come across one, and how you dealt with it, and whether they got the jump on you or whether you were actually able to get the jump on one. Like always, you can reach me at Clueless Game Master on Instagram, or give me a shout out on the subreddit, and I'll try and answer any questions you have. Look forward to hearing you. Back to the guild hall, Dan and Adam.
Okay, we often see the creatures can't cast spells unless they're in their natural form. Why do you think this is? Is it the somatic component? Is that what it is? You don't have fingers because you're a snake, so
I think it's a mixture of the somatic, and the verbal.
you can't move your tongue enough to
or in the way that you learned the spell, right? Like if you learn a spell as a druid and then you are a bear, your tongue just moves differently.
What if I take off my clothes and I'm a bear druid?
Wrong type of bear.
Now I can just do that somatic component a little bit better with a little flippity-floppity added to it, Dan.
I'm going to move on to other large-sized snakes. The Abomination is a large-sized snake, but I assume this is because...
Well, it's not a snake, it's a Yuan-Ti.
Well, it's a Yuan-Ti snake guy. Now, I assume this is because the snake body that makes up its lower half is large. It doesn't specifically state anywhere, but I assume that these guys have regular human torsos on top of their snake forms. For a large-sized creature that could stretch out and coil, do you think they'd take up a 5-foot by 10-foot slot on a grid, or a?
What do you mean, like a horse?
Like a horse, or a full 10 by 10?
Like a Garistro. Which they're both like large size.
Aren't Garistro huge?
You're right.
Like an ogre.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
I don't know. Honestly, whenever I would do my snake stuff before, were you? Yeah, you were there.
I was there. Yeah. You had one that was like, it was a 10 by 10 square, but
then it coiled out, and I was using pennies to like show where its body was as it's like snaked around the map and whatnot. And although it was a 10 by 10 square, it could stretch out to be like 7 or 8 squares on the grid, which is far larger than large. Mm-hmm. But I just assumed that it was thin enough that it would still count by mass.
Sure. Yeah, I wouldn't go any larger than 4 segments.
Oh, no, I have no problem doing that if it's thin. I look at the idea that a horse is large and an ogre is large doesn't make any sense to me.
We've complained about this a few times on the podcast about how
size categories are arbitrary.
Size works is weird now, especially with no colossal or tiny.
Well, yeah, no, when you get to gargantuan no, there is tiny. There's not diminutive.
Not diminutive, yeah.
When you get to gargantuan or tiny, it's just anything above gargantuan or below, or really anything above huge is gargantuan. It can be the size of a mountain or the size of a house.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. It's just gargantuan size, which doesn't fucking help because there's no actual size descriptions.
Yeah, it could be a motive light or a, small cat for diminutive.
For tiny, there's no diminutive.
Well, for tiny, yes.
Right, which is it frustrates the shit out of me because
me too.
Clearly,
I have trouble with it because of my 3.5 where they had those.
So I look at it like it's overall weight and volume.
Yep, that tracks with me. I'm with you on that one.
So anyway, when it comes to the attacks of the Abomination, I just want to move into the stat block for a sec. I think it's clear that they want to constrict first.
Okay.
As it ties up one of their enemies, gives them advantage on future attacks against that enemy and whatnot, right? Because they get that constrict and the restrained. Next, of course, is going to be the bite attack because it does a total of 4d6 plus 4 damage, as opposed to the scimitar, which does 2d6 plus 4.
And they're going to know that their bite is more powerful than their sword.
Absolutely.
Right? They're smart enough to realize that.
It's always useful to look at what the options are available in the multi-attack to determine the order of attacks and the strategy of the creature in question. Because this is a high intelligence creature, it does have some real tactics on the battlefield.
Yeah, this is your opportunity as a DM to really get granular with your tactics on the battlefield as well with your party.
This is going to be your big bad evil guy of your low level campaign.
Yeah. Now, we also see that their additional traits and abilities that are listed in Volos really give us a little bit more variety and fun for our abominations that they could use on top of that. So you could kind of customize them a little bit. But I think we should use those sparingly. Adding detail and nuance to different fights is cool. But if you overdo it, it could be a little repetitive.
You're talking about the variants.
The variants, yeah.
Look, remember, the save on the polymorph variant is going to be the same as the save for spellcasting, which is the DC 15.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't say that specifically anywhere, but that's what it is. It is technically just more spellcasting.
Yeah. Also, it's worth pointing out that when Brad says that the polymorph, antipathy, and sticks to snakes actions all go off every 6 rounds, he's hitting you with an average of every 6 rounds. You actually have about a 17% chance of getting a recharge on any one of these.
Yeah, because you're rolling a D6, right? It's a recharge on S6. So Brad just likes to talk in averages sometimes.
Yeah.
But anyway, at face value, these guys, they look like your vicious brutes and your nasty brawlers, but in reality, they are the schemers and masterminds of the Yuan-Ti. They have the mental stats to back that.
Yeah.
Do not sit there and look at it really quickly when you look at the CR rating and say, oh, that guy's going to be the final boss that's going to pound on them with their fists. No, they're still smarter than your characters.
Yeah, we want Bane from the comics, not Bane from Batman Forever.
No, Batman and Robin.
Not Bum.
Exactly.
Or Bane from Harley Quinn, which is amazing.
Yes, the HBO show.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
welcome to the pit. I'm pit.
What was that voice? You used Kermit the Frog at the
I don't know.
There.
Anyways, Megan, speaking of Kermit the Frog, Megan is going to be covering the Malison from Castle Ravenloft.
Yikes.
All right. Hello, everyone. This is Megan here, of course, from Castle Ravenloft. Yes, I'm still here, and it's been quite some time. But I promise there's nothing to worry about. I have just been here kind of looping the same hallways for the last couple of hours, but I'm sure it'll be fine. If you hear weird noises, of course, that just comes with being in a creepy little castle, so apologies. So I actually wanted to take some time, of course, to break down and dive into the Yuan-Ti Malison, which to kind of get started, I feel like I have to give you guys some imagery. These guys are your half-humanoid, half-serpent kind of physicality. And if you're wondering, but Megan, what half is what? Don't worry, you actually get to choose. So I'll dive into that a little bit later. In society, these guys would be kind of considered your middle classmen. And then to add to that, they do have the ability to kind of carry magic as well. They are well liked by their serpent gods. So you do sometimes see them as either worshippers or, even they can be like warlock, depending on, what alignment you want to go with these guys. So weirdly enough, in fact, there is a cool little small variant in the books, which is really interesting to read about. It's just kind of like a little bit of blip, a little bit of a storyline, that there are 3 priests with names that I literally am having a hard time pronouncing.
Sidebar, really quickly. The names of the priests are Arakiti, Kultha, and Nis. They're in the Tomb of Annihilation, which has a decent Yuan-Ti presence.
Significantly, yeah.
And they get Eldritch Blast with 2 beams, a +5 to hit, and 1d10 +3 force damage per beam. They also get Minor Illusion and Poison Spray, and all of that replaces their longbow attacks because they are far sneakier.
Oh yeah, for sure.
They do utilize the Malison Breakdown, but they do just gain magical spells right away. So like Eldritch Blast and things like that. So I feel like these guys kind of have it all. Very customizable for making PCs, for making NPCs, for making armies, for making towns, for making anything that you want. Very, very creatively malleable, which I think is really neat for anyone who's a DM or anyone who's trying to make it maybe a PC. This might be one to kind of give yourself a good start on. But let's get into some stats. How about that? So these guys here, as I said, if you think of them as your middle classmen, you'll kind of understand that if you're going to be building these as an NPC in your games. They do only have a challenge rating of 3, so if you're going to be coming up against them, they're not overly powerful. They have an armor class of 12. I feel like that kind of goes with their snake skin, but if you were to put armor on these guys, of course, that would beef that out. They have a regular speed of 30, so kind of similar to any other regular humanoid, which I think I would love to get your guys' opinion on whether or not you think that if the bottom half is a snake, if they should be able to slither a little bit faster. That's just my thoughts. The Malisons, of course, have a strength of +3, a dex of +2, and a constitution of +1. So at first you would glance at this and be like, these are totally built to be very fighty. However, they also have a +2 of intelligence, a +1 of wisdom, and a +3 of charisma. Because remember, like, I'll get into it, but their spellcasting ability is charisma when they do end up having spells. But I just find it so interesting that, like, they're above average in everything. It's so crazy to me. But yeah, they do have higher skills in deception and stealth. So think snake. They're going to be hiding in the trees and the bushes. They're going to be quite quiet when they slither around or move around. They have damage immunities to poison. Again, like I've mentioned it maybe once or twice, but snakes, poison, it just makes sense. In my mind, I think maybe because of Pokemon, that might be my own problem. They do, of course, have dark vision of up to 60 feet and a passive perception of 11. So, again, why did Dragonborn not have dark vision, but the snake folk do? Anyways, I digress. And then, of course, for languages, they have Abyssal, Common, and Draconic. So, very well read, very well knowledgeable characters. So, but yeah, so these guys, they do have a couple of really neat abilities. They do have Shape Changer. So, as an action, they can use Polymorph to change into a medium-sized snake and then or back into its true form. And the statistics do tend to stay the same. And any equipment and stuff that they're carrying isn't transferred. So, it doesn't change form if it dies. So it's just a really, I don't know, I feel like it's a useless addition to this character. I don't really see the benefit in it, but of course maybe you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. So it does describe that they have innate spellcasting, which is a charisma saving throw for these folks in the Yuan-ti. So basically it just says that they can innately kind of cast spells, but in the book it only gives animal friendship for snakes only. They do have magic resistance. They do have advantage on saving throws against spells and magical effects. This one's really cool because I do find that a lot of characters sometimes have this ability, and it's one that PCs tend to forget about. So it'd be really interesting to build yourself a PC that has that and actually be one of their only abilities they can use, which is kind of forcing them to use it. So now it gets into the really interesting part. So, as I said at the beginning, Yuan-tis that have the Malison type, you can actually decide which half is human, which half is, snake-like, so on and so forth. So they have different types listed within the book. They have up to 5. So they have 3 that they list in the regular stat block, and then they do have another 2 of a rare type of Malison that, you can utilize for your PCs or your NPCs or what have you. So, and then they actually have a different stat block of attack capabilities based on which type you choose, obviously, right? So if you're choosing that you have the upper body of a human, you're probably going to have more physical upper body strength attacks and so on and so forth. So they do have type 1, which is a human body and a snake head. They have type 2, which is a human head and body with snakes for arms. And then they have type 3, which is a human head and upper body with a serpent lower body instead of legs. And then they do actually have like a little bit of a smaller table, which if you wanted to randomize, of course you can, because in the books you can randomize anything with just rolling d10s and stuff like that. They do have the ability to choose a couple of different things for their arms. So you can choose to have like a cluster of snakes for arms, or one large snake for arms, or scaly humanoid with snake head for a hand kind of thing, which I thought was probably the weirdest one in my mind, was just having these really, really long snake, like regular human arms, and then have little tiny snake heads for hands. It's just, anyways. And then, of course, for the other 2 rare types, they have type 4, so human form with 1 or more serpent tails, and then type 5, which is human form covered in scales, which I feel like is more like your Dragonborn, but I mean, I digress. So I'm going to go through a couple of their attack options for the main 3 that they have within the actual book here. So for type 1, which a reminder is a human body and a snake head, they do have a multi-attack ability. So it takes 2 attacks, 2 melee attacks, but it can also use its bite, but only once. So it does have a bite attack, it does carry a scimitar, and it does carry a longbow. So, of course, with the human body, you have arms, so you can utilize weapons as per like a regular fighter, is kind of how I see it. And for type 2, of course, you've got your human head and body with snakes for arms. So they have the ability to multi-attack similar to the type 1, but it uses bite with its arms instead of its head. And then for type 3, it does, of course, have the same thing where it has multi-attack, but again, this is the human head and upper body with a serpentine lower body instead of legs. So And they do have a multi-attack, and so it can utilize 2 melee attacks, or it can try to constrict using its tail body. So it does have bite, as well as it can use a scimitar and a longbow. Again, it has arms, like a humanoid. But then with its base, it can attempt to constrict someone. And then, of course, that leads to being grappled, which, as everybody knows, is my favorite thing in the world. So, but yeah, so it's very interesting that you can kind of decide which direction you want to go with your character build with this. And as I said, they do have the rare types of type 4 and 5, which 4 was the human form with 1 or more serpentine tails, and then 5, which is the human form covered in scales, which again reads to me as Dragonborn. But it uses the same stat block build, but just has its regular multi-attacks. It has bite, and then it can carry a scimitar and a longbow. So, yeah, I feel like if you wanted to play a more safe version of the Malison, you would probably go for the rare types of 4 and 5 if you're playing a PC, just because as I said, they read as Dragonborn. And if you're not feeling overly creative with how to do your attacks, that's definitely a direction I would go. But honestly, like as I said, I think my favorite part of these guys is their customizability. Just for in the sense of being a player, it would be interesting to build one of these just simply because I can basically be creative with whatever I want. And get creative to like the environment of the world. Like if it is definitely more of a swampy place, maybe you would do a snake base for your character so that it can slither around a little bit easier. But again, interested on your guys' thoughts on whether or not these guys' speed should increase if they are slithering on a tail. And honestly, like I was imagining in my head, I feel like Adam would definitely put together a army of these guys, but use every variant just for the sake and fun of describing it to his players. That's just all I could imagine in my head. But absolutely interested in your guys' thoughts. I think they are very interesting and a lot of fun. So honestly, like, what's your guys' opinions? What do you think your favorite variant would be? What would you guys use? So definitely throwing it back to you to kind of finish this one off. But obviously, audience, you can follow me on Instagram at OmegaO, which is actually 0 MEGA0, or just listen to a lot of the older episodes to get used to my amazing wits. But yeah, have a great week, everyone.
Yeah, I would totally mix and match these guys and ramp up the body horror.
100%. Like, why wouldn't you? Right? Like having the variance between their forms is what is going to cause your party to take a step back. And it's always a great moment to look at a mix of enemies in front of you and try to figure out which one is the one you take down first. Like we mentioned earlier with Abominations that they're your strategists, and it gives you as a DM an opportunity to be a strategist.
The Malisons are strategists too.
Very much so. And gives you as a DM an opportunity to be a strategist against your players.
Yeah, and actually that leads into the fact that Megan doesn't like these guys turning into medium snakes. She doesn't like that. She thinks it's dumb. But Megan sees it from a player standpoint, right? This is not about adding to the action economy. This is about fucking escaping. This is about getting away. This is your retreat factor. Your Malisons are still smart enough to live another day.
Would you think inside of Yuan-Ti temples and old ruins and stuff, there are little snake-sized holes that lead in little tunnels just to get away along these main thoroughfares and hallways?
It's right in the lore all the way through it. We'll talk about it next week.
Oh, fantastic. Cool. The other thing that Megan brought up that she doesn't like is the fact that these guys get suggestion 3 times a day. Normally, we don't get into a big spell breakdown in the middle of our mob episode, but here's why this is important. Suggestion is a 2nd level enchantment spell. It takes an action to cast. It has a range of 30 feet. I like its material components because, like, one of them is like a snake's tongue.
Yeah.
Right? Or a little bit of honey and a drip of oil.
Oh,
like you have
and,
a honey.
and.
Yeah, like you have a honeyed tongue.
Or it's
or
snake oil.
Or it's a snake oil. Yeah, I like that. But it lasts up to 8 hours. Don't sleep on that. It lasts forever. Right?
Yeah, and I mean, it's for bards, sorcerers, warlocks, and wizards. And
any arcane spellcasters.
Of course, Yuan-Ti.
Yeah. So with it, you get to suggest.
When you're making up words.
You get to suggest. That one wasn't intentional. You get to suggest a course of activity limited to a sentence or 2 and magically influence that creature that you see within range as long as they can see or understand what you say. Creatures that, of course, can't be charmed or anything like that are immune to this effect, but on top of that, the suggestion must be worded in such a manner as to make the course of actions sound more reasonable. Asking the creature to stab itself, for example, or throw itself into a pit, immolate itself, or do any other obviously harmful act ends the spell. So there's not just...
Yeah, this is not an immediate suicide spell.
Yeah. So the target makes that wisdom saving throw after you give them the suggestion.
Yeah.
On a failed save, it pursues that course of action that you described to the best of its ability. Okay?
It does not make them superhuman, though.
It doesn't make them superhuman. No, you're completely right. Now, the suggested course of action can continue for the entire duration of 8 hours. So, one of my favorites is go dig a pit. Dig a hole there.
I think of the comic book Preacher. Now,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
People will be familiar with the TV show, but my favorite thing, now, you can't do it for suggestion, because the idea is that he has the word of God, and when he tells people to do things, they have to do them. They have to, until they're told to stop. So he tells someone to count every grain of sand on this beach. And then they stumble upon that character again, like 36 issues later. He is emaciated. He's got a long beard. He hasn't showered in weeks. He has counted every grain of sand on the beach to the best of his ability. And he is like, he hasn't slept except
geez.
exhaustion. Like, there's nothing else that he can do except this. I like the idea of, kill everybody in here. Murder all of the slaves. That can be one of the suggestions.
Yeah, as long as it doesn't do any self-harm,
Yep.
you're golden, right? Now, one of the things, though, if the task is completable within that 8 hours, the spell will end once that task is completed.
So you're wasting this on a make me a cup of tea.
Yes, right? Use this for your 8-hour tasks, for your longer tasks. Don't use this for like a command level spell, right? Now, you can also specify additional conditions that will trigger a special activity during the duration, right? For example, you might suggest a knight to give her warhorse to the first beggar she meets. If the condition isn't met before the spell expires, the activity isn't performed.
Sure. Again, you have to keep it simple, though. You only get a couple sentences.
Yeah.
If you want it to be a more complicated thing, you got to cast it again.
Yeah, and if you or any one of your allies harms the target, the spell is going to end.
That doesn't make any sense to me, but sure, why not? That's just how charm works. Do they remember that they've been charmed at the end of this? It doesn't say that like they do with friends.
If it doesn't say it, then no. I would say no. I would say they look at their hands and be like, why was I doing this? They would not recall who told them to do it.
What have I done?
Yeah, right? This is going to be your werewolf, call ahead for a couple weeks from now. This is going to be your werewolf coming to after a full moon night of ravaging.
Yeah.
Right? Just what the fuck just happened?
I have a full moon night of ravishing. Anyway, okay.
There's not enough.
There are so many parts to this stat block because there are all of these different variants.
Yeah.
Right? There are so many different attacks listed for all the different variants, but I guess the thing to really focus on here is that if it gets a bite, it has minimal piercing and decent poison damage for a CR3.
Yep.
The constrict attack is that it may or may not have, depending on whether or not it has a tail, is similar to the Abomination, but with slightly less damage and with a lower escape DC. If it has a scimitar attack, it's stuck with the standard scimitar slashing damage, and the longbow is better piercing damage than the bite attack, but only the type 1 has the same 2d6 poison that the bite has. Like, there's a lot going on here. And I guess that the bite has the poison because it has a snake head and therefore produces its own venom, but others don't. Like, there's a lot of conditional shit going on here. We could spend a whole episode really getting into the different kinds of Malisons and their tactics and whatnot. But generally speaking, these are your nobility cast.
Yeah.
That can really mix it up. Like, they're going to fight a rough, brutal fight. I
mean, if you remember those, like, the polymorph and antipathy and sticks to snakes that the Abominations get, your Malisons are going to get that as well to add on top of everything, right? Like, you have so much customizability, so many options to do with these things. Get creative, I want to say.
Yeah, and you can be a little creative. Like, it's got 12d8 plus 12 hit points, and that's beefy for a CR3.
Yep.
But let's be honest, you're not running into one of these at a time. This is a mob. You'll be encountering multiples at a time. You're not going to run into an Abomination by itself. It's going to have 3 of these around it. Mm-hmm. This pushes us up into tier 3 easily. You are going to be encountering these guys in groups. So they're pretty deadly for their CR, but are they worth the headache for a Dungeon Master to track all the differences among all the different kinds of Malisons? Are you going to, like, at what point are you like, oh, this was the one with the snake arms, that one's one with the head, this was the one that can constrict over here. If you don't have the minis or the icons set up, like, this can be a real problem. You're doing Theater of the Mind, I'm not going to have more than like 2 or 3 of these guys in a battle.
Well, and if you do, I would say one of the things you do, you pre-build, of course, your Malisons. You have their stats assembled, and build little groups that you just keep together, right?
Yeah.
So you'll have your Malison with the snake arms, your Malison with the tail, and the Malison with the fangs, right? That's a little 3-person unit, and that's going to cover the west side of the battle, while your exactly identical group is going to manage that side, so you can help figure it out in your brain and keep order of it in your brain a little bit easier, right? Variety is going to come in with not necessarily with each individual being different, but with making sure that they are unique in their little unit, not necessarily in the battle as a whole.
You can still use clothes and coloration variances to tell the difference between them. So you have some management to do with this as a Dungeon Master. Now, we talked briefly about, Dave mentioned the bite and the shape changer ability for the Pureblood, and it was Brad that talked about the polymorph into snakes, the snake antipathy, and the sticks to snakes, but there are actually 3 more as well that apply. Any Yuan-Ti can have chameleon skin, which just means that they get advantage on stealth checks made to hide.
Okay, yeah, sure. Yeah, it's not invisibility. It's not a perfect blending into the background, but it's close enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other one, which is really cool, any Yuan-Ti can do this. They can shed their skin as a bonus action to get free from a grapple or to pull out of shackles or anything else. That
is flavorful as shit.
You can only do it once a day, but then it has to spend 1 minute eating its shed skin, and it regains hit points equal to half its hit point maximum when it does that, which is so gross.
Yucky.
Yeah.
And all Yuan-Ti get this.
All Yuan-Ti
including a Pureblood.
Yeah.
Just like eating your skin suit. Gross.
Yeah.
That's gross.
Oh, what are you doing? Are you eating chips? Who got you chips? Nope.
Crunch,
crunch, crunch.
Or even different from that, like I put the lotion on my skin.
Speaking of, there's another one, and this one is called Acid Slime. This one is for the Abomination, the Malison, and the Anathema as well. Yeah. So
not the Pureblood.
No. As a bonus action, the Yuan-Ti can coat its body in a slimy acid that lasts for 1 minute. A creature that touches the Yuan-Ti, hits it with a melee attack while within 5 feet of it, or is hit by the constrict attack, takes 1d10 acid damage on top of it.
Cool.
So there's no save on that. You just take it.
There's not a lot of things in the game that is just like, if you're under the constrict or you're under this action, you're just taking this damage. I like this.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
I like this a lot. Yeah. Okay. So before we wrap up with our tactics and all the other crazy shit.
Yeah, sure.
I just want to thank everybody that gave us a hand building this episode. I also want to thank those of you who have been donating. It makes a world of difference to us to get those donations in. It's kept the lights on here.
Especially during the pandemic where things have gotten a little bit more complicated with the new format. That's helpful.
Yeah, it really is. And so we are constantly looking at ways to update our mic setup and our software and whatnot, so we can give you guys a better product. So I wanted to thank those of you that have donated, and I want to encourage other people to think about checking out our store, so you're not just tossing money at us for free. But if you like donating, if you are a altruistic person, then of course we will love you forever.
Or just a fan.
And I just want everyone to please consider tossing a couple bucks our way so we can buy Dan a fucking dictionary so we can learn how to pronounce these goddamn words and stop making shit up.
If they buy the dictionary, do I have to read it?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes, you do.
I want to remind everybody that you can find us on all of social media as well. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, and primarily, it seems these days, r/It's a Mimic on Reddit. That's where you're going to get a hold of Adam and I and Dave and Brad and those guys far easier. You could also reach us through our email at info@itsamimic.com, because we love hearing from you guys. We love talking with you guys, and any questions that you send us will get added to a special mailbag episode in the future. So, Adam, as we move on here, we're going to talk about our mob structures, how we build our Yuan-Ti societies. Let's grab the dice. I want to know how you're building your typical city first, like just in terms of numbers. What are we looking at for like a city state and what their systems are?
Can we do that next episode? Because I break down cities.
So next week we're going to be breaking down cities. So I don't want to know necessarily what we're doing for cities. Let's go more granular. Let's go for our encounters. How are you building these encounters for, say, a tier 2 party? Because that's where Yuan-Ti are really going to play in the most. It's tier 2.
Yeah.
And then they'll bleed into tier 3. So let's roll the dice on that one. I got a tree.
I got a 10. All right, so there are really, in my brain, 4 kinds of Yuan-Ti encounters.
Okay.
One is you discover a plot in another city that's not a Yuan-Ti city, at which point you're running into a pureblood, and it's subterfuge and espionage.
Do you give that pureblood, like say you take the pureblood as an attack at its home or where it's staying in residence, it just has pet snakes?
There will be sneaky things around, but I don't think that it's not going to do it on purpose. Right? I will make it shed its skin once a day, but it's going to do it in private at night.
Yeah.
And you may find flecks of shed skin here and there. Right? It's not going to really let anybody else know that it is snake-like or Yuan-Ti.
I'm just imagining the water-deep, deep noir-level detective feature where you're trying to find the dandruff killer.
Well, there you go. The next encounter in my head is you're infiltrating the city.
Yep.
And that can be whatever you need it to be. Like, that's its own weird, unique mob thing. When you think about Drow or the Sahuagin or the even the Goblinoid encampment, right? When you get behind enemy lines, that's a whole different story. You don't know what you're running into.
Yeah.
I'm going to be designing the encounters with mostly purebloods, and I'm going to let my players know to avoid the Malisons and the Abominations when at all possible, so that I can chain these things together, encounter after encounter after encounter.
Yep.
Because if they end up against an Abomination, but they're in the heart of the city, even if they win, they're low on resources to get out.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot of place to rest. So it's going to be snakes. It's going to be Broodguard, right? The third one is you run into them defending the borders.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? In my head, this is also you being captured at the same time.
This is where you're going to find some, like, you're fighting some of the slaves, some Broodguard, and purebloods as well. Like, there's...
Yeah, there might be
one or two
Malisons.
Malisons, but not much.
This is going to be, your standard patrol or your guard or whatever you're going to run into. And be careful because these CRs will stack very quickly with these guys. But the last one, and I'm going to talk about this next episode, is when you run into the cults, because they're cults, the Yuan-Ti cults of humans that exist in other cities are real things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For me, you kind of hit all the bases there quite well. I like bringing Malisons in because they are very weird and otherworldly almost. Like, they add that weird aspect to it. So I like using Malisons for other purposes as well. This is going to possibly catch a lot of flack, not necessarily from you though, because you did this to us. You took Malisons and just went, but what if they're goblins? And that was a great 3-session little campaign arc we had, where you're like, they're goblins, but this one's spitting venom, and this one's got a 15-foot tail to it.
Yeah, it's funny because I didn't even think about Yuan-Ti when I did that. I just made snake goblins.
Yeah.
They had just been perverted by a snake god, and they could unhinge their jaw and swallow small creatures.
Yeah.
And shit. Like, it was gross. It was cool, but it was gross.
And I know we've said that in straight lore of 5e, Yuan-Ti, especially when you get to the Malisons and the Abominations, are humans that have been changed to this, full stop, right? You might get some other humanoids coming in as Broodguard, but that's as deep down that trail as they go. using that flavor for like an isolated tribe of goblins or snake-themed kobolds would be pretty cool, especially if they have a very serpentine green dragon that they worship. I know we complained earlier about the draconic being a part of this, but if you lean into it, it could be pretty damn cool too.
Yeah, it could be. It doesn't take much for you to reskin a dragon to take away its breath weapon and its limbs and have a gigantic fucking snake too.
Yeah. This is homebrewing. So let's talk a little bit more about homebrewing, specifically if you're going with rolling one of these guys up as a player character.
Sure.
Okay. Now, as we said, your option is being a pure blood. If you roll a pure blood, you're going to get an increase to your charisma by 2. That makes sense. You are imposing your will on people.
Yeah.
Charisma. Your intelligence also goes up by 1. Very rare we see 2 of the social stats get raised, or 2 of the 2 of the mental stats being raised, or 2 of the physical stats being raised. When they do that, it's kind of weird. They often, in the design, like to give you 1 of the mental, 1 of the physical.
Yeah.
So these guys aren't necessarily your frontline fighters. They are all about the long game, the mental game.
Yeah, I also like the fact, too, that they've got... I could make an illusionist, right? I could make a kind of wizard with that bump to intelligence and then just have amazing charisma saves as well, right? That's...
Now, like their humanoid human counterparts, purebloods mature at the same rate as humans. Their alignments, they're devoid of most emotion, and we've said, by and large, they lean towards neutral evil.
Yeah, they don't give a shit about laws. They do give a shit about rituals, but specifically only theirs.
Yeah. As with their normal human selves, they are medium-sized. They're going to be the same general size as humans.
Yeah.
And they walk the same speed as humans.
Sure.
Okay? Where they deviate is they get dark vision of 60 feet.
Well, who doesn't?
Dragonborn, Firbolg, human, their choices of who gets dark vision and who doesn't, it just boggles my mind.
Look, these things have been blessed by evil gods.
And it does track for them.
This tracks more than some of the others.
Yeah, you're not wrong. They do get some innate spellcasting next, which they get the ability to cast Suggestion, like we've mentioned a couple times already. However, it's coming in at 3rd level. You don't get it right away. And it's only once per long rest, once per day. Okay?
Sure.
And regardless of what your spell... You could be a wizard. Charisma is going to be your spell casting trait for this one. Okay? That's the big one. Next, you get... you get the poison spray cantrip. Let's get the easy one out of the way here.
Sure, I would rather you get a bite attack, but fine.
Yeah, but you get animal friendship and a limited amount of times per day. It's kind of kooky until you realize that you get it with just snakes. Just snakes.
You get parcel tongue.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah. Next, you get magic resistance, which is the same as the dwarf one almost, where you just get advantage on saves against magical spells or spell-like effects.
That's fucking huge. That is the best thing so far.
Yeah. It's weird. It's weirdly placed here. Why
you are blessed by massive gods. You are inherently magical creatures. This tracks for me. You are more magical than a halfling or a lizard folk. It makes sense. You have directly in your lineage been blessed by a serpent god. Okay,
but why wouldn't Dragonborn get the same level of thing?
Don't get them mixed up. It's not that Yuan-Ti don't deserve this. It's a Dragonborn do, and they've been done dirty.
Yeah, okay, I'm with you there. Next, moving on, they get poison immunity.
Sure, yep, next.
Yeah, cool.
From both damage and condition, yeah.
And they can, this one's weird to me, they can speak Common,
yep.
Sure. Draconic, we mentioned
Boo.
it. Boo. And Abyssal.
Right. Let me get into that with the god stuff next episode.
Cool, we can do it. Now, we now know what the players do. What kind of insight can we pull from these for home brewing?
What's interesting here is that the DMG that always has if you want to be a kobold, add this to this one. They don't have that.
No, they don't.
Not for Yuan-Ti. Because Yuan-Ti are so radically different. They don't even have it for the Yuan-Ti Pureblood. There's no just add this, and you get the poison immunity. There's none of that. When you want to play a noble, right, an NPC noble, you just grab a Pureblood and make it a noble.
Yeah.
Right? You don't use the noble stat block, right? That's really crazy to me. So one of the things that I'm going to think about when I'm doing the homebrew like I did to the goblins, I should have looked at this at the time, but it would have standardized it a little bit more. I look at this because it's only pureblood and it's not the others. Mm-hmm. It's pretty basic.
Sure.
But I'm going to say that when I'm homebrewing, it's going to have dark vision. I think that a lot of Yuan-ti temples and stuff are going to be in deep jungle and underground.
Oh, yes, for sure.
I can see there being weird little Yuan-ti communities in the Underdark even.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
I could see them going up against the Gith a lot, especially in like Limbo. You can have, if they could find some way if they could find some way to ward their city against the chaos of Limbo, I could see them there being the evil society against the Githzerai that are there, because they are all about growing power. It makes sense that these guys will want to planeswalk or planes slither, I guess. So
I really like that, especially when you look into they're that ancient civilization, and we've only ever seen one other like really big mention of an ancient human civilization, and that's the Netheral, which play heavily into, say, the Rime of the Frostmaiden. There's a big Netheral faction there. Yeah. Right? So if you wanted to keep them on the material plane and have this weird battle back and forth, having them with the Netheral and the magic kingdom that was that, I mean, that plays for an incredibly intriguing campaign.
Yeah, it's weird that these guys don't have an inherent hatred of elves, which have beat them back.
Yeah.
Apparently orcs do, and everybody's got their own little thing that they hate. It's with the Yuan-ti.
Hate humans primarily, by the way.
They don't even hate. They're just like, hey, you guys are cattle.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Now, I did mention earlier that we were going to cover something a little bit later when it came to running a Yuan-ti and homebrewing as a DM. And this is going to go on, fall back into some personality traits that they have. Yeah. In Volos, there is a little D8 table that gives you some insights into it. So, Adam, I want you to roll me a D8 real quick and tell me what number you get.
I got a 3.
You got a 3. So, Adam, you prefer to be alone rather than among other creatures, including your own kind. Like,
that makes sense.
Try again, one more time.
I got a 5.
5. I believe I am superior to all others of my caste.
That's true of me, though.
I mean,
both of those are.
I mean, you believe, yeah, that's true. Believing doesn't necessarily make it true.
But it can.
But not necessarily is.
If you believe it, it will happen. If you build it, they will come.
This isn't I knew you were going to feel the dreams with this shit, and fuck you. Anyways, if you need some inspiration on running your pureblood who has infiltrated a kingdom, going to this personality chart really, really helps. And there's a bunch of really cool options here, including weird things like, I only eat the upper crust of food. Like, I have incredibly high standards for food. These guys are like nothing less
I'm like
than
only the top of a pie. That's what I thought you meant there.
I mean, some would say it's the best part of the pie. Anyways.
No one says that.
I do.
You're very strict. You don't eat the pie filling?
The pie filling's good, but the top crust is, like, important. I get, okay, little thing about Dan. There is a difference between a tart and a pie.
Yeah.
And a meringue.
Yes.
And motherfuckers need to understand that there is a difference between a tart and a pie specifically. And
a pie has an upper crust.
A pie has an upper crust.
There's a pie shell, yeah.
Yeah. The amount of times I see, like, big restaurants, these people cook for a fucking living, marketing, I don't know, a blueberry pie, and it's open face. It's a fucking tart. And they're like, no, it's a pie. Listen here, White Spot, you sons of bitches. It's a fucking tart.
Nobody knows what White Spot is. It's a BC thing.
It's a BC thing only. There's a bunch of people listening in BC. You get it. But it's a fucking regional restaurant. It's one of my favorite restaurants, but every single spring they bring up their blueberry fucking pie, and it's a tart. And I used to work for White Spot. It's the restaurant that made me stop cooking at restaurants. There's a thing there. There's a story. We won't get into it now, but fuck. Also, pies need tops.
Wow, that was a hell of a fucking segue. And I will also say this. It's not a tart, what they serve. It's technically a flan.
Yeah, you're right. Anyways, so that will be a decent portion of what we can find in 5e on Yuan-ti and pies. But we're only about half done.
Apparently. Is there a pie chart in the
God, there should be.
I feel like there should be more pie charts and graphs and other things.
I think we're getting too nerdy about that, like too hyper lot. Like, you're a guy who likes your spreadsheets. I am adverse to them.
Yeah, I don't understand why. It's simple organization at a glance.
Oh,
Whenever I find a chart in the DMG, I'm very happy.
You are, yeah.
I just wish that there would be some sort of, well, you get it on Reddit all the time. People like break down how many monsters are actually immune to radiant damage. It's useful information to have.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it comes from the fact that I am a bit of a sports fan when it comes to hockey, and I get really frustrated when I see people like comparing useless side stats, and that's all done in spreadsheet.
I can talk about sportscasters another time.
Yeah, anyways, everybody, don't forget to come back next week when we're going to cover another 4 kinds of Yuan-ti, as well as we mentioned a few times, their gods and the cults around them. That'll be it for this episode of the It's a Mimic podcast. If you'd like to support us, you can head on over to www.itsamimic.com and hit our fancy donate button, or tell some of your friends and the rest of your D&D party about the podcast. We're available on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube, as well as most podcast apps. Thank you, and stay safe out there.
Thank you for listening to another It's a Mimic production. Inquiries, shoutouts, requests, and mailbag questions can be sent to info@itsamimic.com.
Hey, Dave again. It's important to remember that the Yuan-ti can turn into different kinds of snakes, and what I wanted to do was just go over what some of those different kinds of snakes could be and some of the features of them. So the first one, of course, is a poisonous snake. These things are very basic. Their AC's 13, they got 2 hit points. They do have a swim speed of 30 feet as well as a regular walking speed of 30 feet. Their dex and constitution are the only 2 that are above a 10, but their strength is a 2, which is still higher than their intelligence at a 1. They do get blind sight of 10 feet and a passive perception of 10. They're a challenge rating of 1/8. Okay, so they're very, very simple. They do get a bite attack, which is +5 to hit, and it has a 5-foot reach. It does 1 piercing damage, and then the target has to do a constitution save with the DC's 10, or else it takes 2d4 poison damage on a failed save, or half as much on a successful one. I mean, that's pretty basic. The more interesting one, though, I think, is the swarm of poisonous snakes. Now, these things are a little bit stronger. They do have an AC of 14 and 36 or 8d8 hit points. Again, their swim and regular speed is 30 feet, just like a regular poison snake. Their dexterity is 18, and con is 11. That's the only 2 stats that are over a 10. Their charisma is a 3. And their intelligence is a 1. These guys aren't planning to do too much. They're a swarm, right? They do get damage resistance, though, to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing, and they are immune to being charmed, frightened, paralyzed, petrified, prone, restrained, and stunned. They also get blind sight out to 10 feet, and passive perception is a 10. A swarm of poisonous snakes is a CR2. Now, what makes these guys really interesting is their swarm ability. The swarm can occupy the same space as a creature, but a creature can also occupy the same space as a swarm. The swarms can move through any opening large enough for a tiny snake, and it can't regain hit points or gain temporary hit points. So that's kind of a neat little feature that they have. For actions, they get a bite action. It's a +6 to hit, but this is interesting. The range is 0 feet. They can't bite to the adjacent square. They have to be in the square with a character to attack them. And they can only attack 1 creature per round. They don't get a multi-attack here. So what they can do is 2d6 piercing damage or 1d6 piercing damage if the swarm is at half of its hit points or fewer. And again, on a successful hit, the target has to make a DC 10 con save or take 4d6 poison damage on a failed save or half as much on a successful one. That's how you're going to make these guys challenging, is hitting with that poison damage. In addition to that, there is also the giant poisonous snake. These things are a CR 1/4. Their AC is 14. They got 11 hit points or 2d8 +2. And they've got the regular old swim/walking speed, or I guess slithering speed of 30 feet. Their dexterity and con are the only attributes above a 10. and the charisma and intelligence are quite lacking at charisma at a 3 and intelligence at a 2. For skills, they do get a perception of +2, and like the other poisonous snakes, they have a blind sight out to 10 feet. These guys do get a melee weapon attack, which is a bite. It's a +6 to hit, but it's got 10-foot reach, which is kind of the main difference between the poisonous snake, the swarm, and the giant. It's the range on them is 0, 5, and 10, with the giant poisonous snake being 10 feet. You don't get that often. That's kind of neat. And especially for a CR quarter, you can kind of make this work for you a little bit by having them hanging down from trees and so on. Now, on a hit, it does do 1d4 plus 4 piercing damage, and they've got to make a con save. This time it's a DC 11, and they take 3d6 poison damage on a failed save, or half as much on a success. Honestly, I just like the idea of having these snakes kind of slithering all over the place, and having your guys have to walk around them. They're fine if they're over there and they're not going to come at you, but if you get close to them, these things are going to strike, which I like the idea of using the giant poisonous snake for that, because it's got that 10-foot reach, and maybe they're avoiding the swarm over here and they're still within striking distance of the regular poisonous snake that's adjacent to them. But then there's this bigger snake hanging in the tree, and they try to walk under it, and it, of course, can't attack. So you can kind of use these to add to the environmental damage as well. And, of course, if these things are actual Yuan-Ti, they can pop up and do all sorts of fun little things that you wouldn't expect.
I like how Dave mentions that snakes are really good environmental hazards and whatnot,
okay.
as opposed to actual monster creature encounters. Let's roll, and do you agree with him that that's how they should be used?
Sure. I got a 3.
I got a 6, man. I beat you every roll this episode.
It happens.
Okay, so except when we rolled snake eyes at the beginning, which is the best thing.
Oh yeah, I'm really happy with that.
So my
people aren't going to believe that it actually happened.
no, it was pretty fucking fun.
Yeah.
So I really like them as an environmental hazard. They should be dealing with all of the time. I would even have it to the point where they're going to interrupt rests when you're behind enemy lines in Yuan-Ti culture.
Yeah, no,
when you get into the city, snakes will appear all of the time.
Yeah, it's almost like they're drawn towards these like locuses of snake energy.
Yeah, kind of. I feel like I feel like though when your guys are holed up in a storage closet trying to get an hour-long rest, it really takes 2 hours because they cannot calm down enough because there are tons of snakes just coming and going.
Okay.
Right? There's always something, and if you don't want to get bitten, you have to stay still. You're not doing anything, but that's stressful, so it takes more time.
Okay. Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I like that. I like having them as an environmental threat as well. I think really it's not just snakes. It's all of these. Once you get a high enough level, these lower level things tend to just be like background noise.
Yeah.
Nah, man. Once they become background noise, that gives you the carte blanche as a dungeon master to use them in any fucky way you want. And as environmental hazards, I love them. I really like to use these things as, I think you hit the nail on the head, as limitations for rest. I think that's...
Use them as omens.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like, there are lots of ways to use them besides just...
Can you imagine your orc character, like, walking down the trail and stopping dead, going, like, just pale-faced, looking and goes, the red and black snake crossed our path.
Yeah, yes. There's a lot of really fun things that you can do with these guys. You know what I'm going to do? Anytime that you do a stealth check at all, it's actually now a 3-part skill challenge because there's fucking snakes everywhere in the Yuan-Ti society.
Yeah.
Right? It is not that simple anymore. Something to think about. I would be very hesitant to go into a Yuan-Ti city.
These guys do get 10 feet of blind sight and
And I haven't drank Hard Lager since I was back in the UK, and already that has been too many years. 9 years. Wow, 9 years. And it's about 2 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, but it's COVID, so what else are you going to do other than drink Hard Lager and... yeah, okay, let's get on with this.
Now I actually can do that somatic component just to...
Motherfuck.
Thank you for listening to an It's a Mimic production.
Okay, you're done. Get it.